Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, November the 8th, 2016. Election day turns into election night. What's up, America? Let's pick a president, y'all. I'm Amna Navaz. We are live in our Times Square studio. We have a cast of awesomeness right here with you all night. Stay with us for live election results, real-time calls as they come in. Let's go around the horn here. We've got Dan Harris, Elsie Granderson, Amy Holmes, Walt Hickey. Guys, it only took us, what, like 600 days to get here?
9,000
a lifetime.
I think when the Electoral College convenes, that's what they say. What's up, America? Let's pick a president, y'all.
That is standard.
That is standard procedure.
Yeah.
It's actually in the founding documents.
Yes. Remember back in the day when we had undercard debates? Like, that's how long it's been. We had like the top tier, and then it was like the lower tier that had their own little 2-hour debate.
It has been a long time.
The primary.
It took you a while.
The primary. Yes.
The kiddie table.
Before we go down the road of nostalgia, let me just say we do actually have some news that we can report. We've got some races that ABC News can project winners in. And starting in Indiana, this will be a surprise to very few people, but Donald Trump, ABC News projects, will win the presidential race in the state of Indiana, 65-31. That's the current vote totals. ABC News can also make a projection in the state of Kentucky, also unsurprising, deeply unsurprising, 65-31. According to the current vote totals, Donald Trump winning Kentucky, and in the Senate race in Kentucky, Rand Paul. Speaking of the primaries, a guy we all saw in the Republican primaries, which now seems several lifetimes, or at least several seasons of reality TV ago. ABC News can project that Hillary Clinton has won the state of Vermont, falling also into the deeply unsurprising category. And finally, Patrick Leahy, the longtime senator of Vermont, has won re-election. Apparently, there was not a deep anti-Star Trek vote in that state. And the projected winner in the Senate race in South Carolina, Tim Scott, a Republican in the South. The first, Amy, you were saying the first
South
Republican.
Carolina, and it's actually his first election.
Right,
that
he was appointed in 2013 by Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley, and the first African-American senator from the South since Reconstruction.
So we've already started making history.
We have. Very good point, LZ. Well done.
We will make history no matter what tonight in some pretty significant ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, the first female president is up for grabs. But what people don't know about Donald Trump, besides the fact that he's a reality TV star, he will be the first president without any military or previous political experience. Right. And so we're literally inviting as much as we possibly can, the common man. Now, granted, he's top 1% and not necessarily that common, but he doesn't come from political background. He's not coming from the military. So,
according to one of these amazing packets of research that gets sent around to the anchors, I know you guys saw this, Donald Trump would also be the first president who has his own board game and his own deodorant.
He has his own deodorant.
He apparently
Lincoln had his own deodorant line. That's not true.
I was like, really? They had deodorant back then?
Is it still available? Or is it like Trump steak?
I'm sure he'd sell it to you. I have a feeling.
Well, I'm just wondering if it went the same way as Trump steak and Trump airline and things like that. Like it was something that was there and now it's no longer here.
It's a collector's item, Elsie.
Okay.
So no surprises in what we've in the races that we're projecting thus far. But we should say that there are a bunch of states where the polls have just closed, where we cannot make a projection, but it's worth going through what the vote totals are as of now. I believe we can bring those to you. We can start with, if we put it up on the board, there we go, with Georgia, which at this point, I don't see any numbers on there. Anybody see any numbers on there?
Not quite yet. It looks like 16 electoral votes up for grabs.
Yeah, 16 electoral votes up for grabs in Georgia, and it's actually become something, some people believe, of a competitive state. South Carolina, a pretty red state, 9 electoral votes up for grabs there. The polls have closed. Virginia, 13 electoral votes up for grabs there. The polls have closed. Indiana, as we said, Donald Trump we're projecting as the winner there. And in Kentucky, Donald Trump, again, we projected him as the winner. The polls have closed there. And Vermont, again, Hillary Clinton projected as the winner. Many states with 7 o'clock poll closings, and many more coming up at 7:30 and then at 8, including the big kahuna, Florida, where the polls close at 8.
And basically our coverage ends. Because if Trump doesn't win Florida, the narrative of how we go with the rest of the election changes dramatically. He wins Florida, all of a sudden now we have ourselves a much more competitive race.
Yeah, but even if he wins
our
Florida,
coverage does not end there, folks.
It was a joke,
here.
people. It was a joke.
But even if he does win Florida, the math is hard for him. The math is hard for him.
Even the best case scenario for him going into today was 266 electoral votes. Real Clear Politics, their state average showed that. That would mean he wins Florida, he wins Ohio, but if you needed to get to the 270, he'd have to flip one of these other states like New Hampshire.
Just to give you a sense of how consequential Florida is going to be for Donald Trump, at 5:38 we run a model, we factor in polls, and then we essentially simulate the election 10,000 times every model run. And so I pulled one of the runs from Monday. And on Monday, if Donald Trump wins the election, he won Florida 93% of the time. So it's not that he cannot win the election if he loses Florida, it's that he closes 93% of his potential avenues to get into it. It's a really consequential state. You can't overstate that. North Carolina as well is going to be one of the most interesting things to watch tonight because you've got a really consequential Senate race there as well.
But Florida is traditionally very close, as we know, anybody who was awake in the year 2000. So it's possible that we won't know who won Florida for quite a while.
No, I mean, last go round in 2012, it wasn't called for President Obama until the day after, and he only won by 0.88 points. So we're talking, when you say very close, we're talking every single vote definitely counts, which is part of the reason why both candidates spent a lot of time in Florida in the last 2 weeks, and also why Hillary Clinton whipped out Cher in Miami.
Going back to Florida 2000, just to give you a sense of how many more folks are voting this cycle so far, when you count up the number of people who cast early ballots in the state of Florida, it's more than the total number of people who cast ballots in Florida in the entire cycle of 2000. So we've got a lot more people turning out. We've got a ton more early vote going on there. And based on how the day of vote goes and how quickly they're able to count that, we may actually get an earlier call than we typically expect from Florida's outstanding reputation at counting ballots.
Right. I think the Chads have been eradicated from the scene.
Right.
But what do we know about who's turning out in Florida?
Right. So again, we only have some indication from the early voting, but from what we've heard, Hispanic turnout is much larger than previous cycles when it comes to turnout in both Nevada as well as Florida. So we're really.
But what about as a percentage of overall votes?
That's precisely what I mean. Yeah. So when it comes to early voting, again, we really need to see how these elections turn out. I'm really excited until we get some additional exit polls. But Hispanic turnout in the early voting appears to be really substantial this time around, even though in some of the other states it appears that African American early voting has somewhat decreased a bit,
including North Carolina.
That's
early voting has been one of those things we're seeing across the board, right? In some key states that have been battlegrounds. You should tell us a little bit more about that in a second. But speaking of the level of enthusiasm that's high, take a look outside here, you guys. We are inside our Times Square studio, but right outside we've got some of our colleagues who are going to be reporting live from a very, very cool special setup we've got in partnership with Facebook right in the middle of Times Square. We're going to be going out there for some live reports to talk to some folks who have gathered there to watch the election results come in live as a group, as a people, as a community.
So is TJ going to be ice skating across the
I
states?
see TJ doing his
It's like 65 degrees outside. So
Maybe rollerblading.
maybe, yeah.
He's just getting ready out there. But that's one of the cool live streams we're going to have for you right here. If you're joining us on Facebook, don't forget, you can submit your questions and comments, and we'll try to incorporate those into our incredible coverage here as the night goes on, into the wee hours. But some of those other states we were talking about with early voting, Florida was one, North Carolina was one, Arizona was another one, right?
Yes. So Arizona all really comes down to Maricopa County. That's where most of the votes are. So when that state comes in, we're going to really try to eye that again. Arizona has traditionally trended red. John McCain has a rather safe election this time around, but Trump a little bit less so. Whereas Trump has, again, kind of realized that he needs to find wins in other states like the Midwest. He again, did a rally in Michigan on the last night of his campaign. Arizona is no longer as safe as it would appear to be, at least moving forward in this election, particularly if, again, the Hispanic community continues to come out to the level that they appear to have come out in this early voting so far, and will kind of vote against Trump in this one, at least.
And while we expect Senator McCain to win tonight, he had some trouble in this re-election, and it was possibly going to be a nail-biter for him, in part because of Donald Trump and also because of the changing demographics of the state.
I mean, you want to talk about the state of Arizona. During our 538 model, we found that, again, as of our last model today, right? There's a 66% chance that Donald Trump wins it. If you're a Republican, that's not the number that you want to see, right? You want to see that be a safe guarantee. You want to be able to move on to new states. You want to be able to move into New Mexico or Colorado potentially. And if you have to expend resources to keep Arizona on your side of the fence, if your average poll, if your polling average is 2 points winning, that's not where you want to be in the state of Arizona, and I think that's just a real testament to where we are so far.
This is not breaking news to the Republican Party, obviously. In 2012, they do the huge autopsy report. One of the biggest things that they pointed out was that we need to make sure we outreach to minorities. These states you're referring to that were safely red, that are now in question, some people are even talking about Texas being in play maybe as early as 2024 because of the increase of Latino voters. This is all referring back to what they talked about in 2012. We need to find a platform, a policy, a message that appeals to this rapidly growing voter bloc.
Right, and a messenger, which is why there's been so much friction and tension between Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Obviously, that you have, Republican elites, many of whom do not intend to vote for Donald Trump today and have said so publicly, some privately, one that I know of, for example, because they feel that he has set the Republican Party back in trying to make inroads and outreach to those communities.
Yeah, in 2004, W got 40% of the Latino vote.
Correct.
I mean,
and John McCain got 31% in 2008.
But it's been on this steady decline since then.
So I think one of the other things that we'll be looking at tonight, and I'm sure you've dug deep into this, is voter turnout and how that may have changed this election cycle. That a lot of pollsters, you have the models, but those are based on 4 years ago, and America has changed in the past 4 years.
And it keeps changing. In fact,
the
what we're
Cubs won
seeing
the World Series, for heaven's sakes. This is a new world.
Well, one of the things we've talked about again and again this cycle is not just how race plays into it, how kind of its divided country plays into how people vote, but the candidates themselves, right? They are incredibly polarizing personalities, and their personalities have come up again and again. I think we have some information on that. I'm going to walk in heels and make this as exciting as possible. Follow me over here for a second.
You sing Beyonce as you walk, or just kind of
sachet?
Okay.
Sachet, no. So let's see if we've got some of this information here. One of the things we pointed to again and again is how people are seeing these candidates when it comes to how they're choosing who to vote for. This favorable divide is as high as it's ever been. When it comes just to Secretary Clinton nationwide, unfavorable, 54% of people see her unfavorably, just 44% favorably. When we turn to her opponent here, Mr. Trump, 61% see him unfavorably and 37% see him favorably. Keep in mind, that's about 10 points higher than people saw both Obama and Romney back in 2012, 10 points higher across each of the parties there. When it comes to whether people see Secretary Clinton as honest and trustworthy, 60% say no, 30% say yes. On the flip side, for Mr. Trump, asked the same question, nationwide voters say that 64% do not see him as honest or trustworthy. Of course, 32% say that they do. And the last thing we'll point out here, related here, Clinton asked the question of whether or not people see her as qualified to be president. Here's where we start to see a little bit of a divide. 53% of people say, yes, Secretary Clinton is qualified to be president, as opposed to Mr. Trump, 61% say that no, they do not see him to be qualified to serve as president. So you guys, regardless of what happens today, we're looking at a country that is very much divided. There's going to be a huge part of this country that's very unhappy with the results, regardless of how they turn out.
Well,
regardless of what happens, you walked in heels beautifully.
I don't think it's the first time she's walked in a pair of
10
heels.
points for that right there.
Well, I mean, she had to do it on live internet.
She's qualified to walk in heels.
She
She's
is
done it before.
I think we're getting into some
experienced, yes.
Genevieve qualified to walk in
here. But in looking at
thank you for saving me.
Right. But I would actually say, unfortunately, the country has been actually very united in their mutual dislike of these candidates. So whichever candidate wins tonight is going to have a lot of repair work to do, not just with the other side ideologically, but with Americans generally.
Absolutely. This is going to be a huge topic of discussion all night long. But hold your breath for just a second, because I want to get it out to Paula Ferris, who's in Florida, ABC's Paula Ferris. Paula, I don't know if you recognize my voice. This is Dan Harris. I'm your co-anchor on Weekend Good Morning America. Can you hear me?
Dan, can I just say how lovely it is to have your voice in my ear? I'm honored, and it's great to talk to you. But can I just tell you, we're on the campus of the University of Miami here, one of the student unions, and virtually all of these students behind me, Dan, are from out of state, but because they know that their vote is going to matter here in Florida, probably more so than in any other state. All of these students they're not native Floridians decided to register here because they know that their vote is going to count. We have Trump vets over here. We have diehard Hillary fans over here. And can I just say, I can't hear anything you're saying because these kids are so loud, but it's nice to see this millennial vote really fired up. Who do you guys think is going to win? And Dan, I've got to say, this is probably a stark contrast from your days at Colby College and my days at Cedarville. These kids are so personally vested in this particular election. They know that this could shape their future. I was asking both of them, all of these kids, why they're supporting their particular candidate, and their answers were pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, the only sit-in I ever saw at Colby College was when they disallowed us from having kegs in our room. I'm not even kidding about that. But Paula,
not a surprise.
Yeah, no, I know.
Not a surprise.
I didn't participate, just for what it's worth. But while we have you, I know you're in Miami, but people talk in terms of the importance of Florida about this I-4 corridor. Can you talk a little bit about, Can you educate us a little bit about this strategically important part of the state?
Yes. Do you guys have a little dry erase board that you can draw Florida? Let me tell you a little bit about the I-4 corridor, particularly Hillsborough County, which is kind of the base of the I-4 corridor. It runs from Tampa through Orlando and then up through Daytona. It's about 132 miles. But what happens in that corridor, the I-4 corridor represents about 43% of the voting population here in Florida. That we've seen the Puerto Rican population go up exponentially, which is obviously going to benefit the Democrats, but the one thing that's keeping Donald Trump alive right in that particular corridor is the white vote. Since 2000, we've seen white Democrats, almost a mass exodus from their party. In 2000, the number of white Democrats that identified themselves as white was 70%. Now it's down to 50%. But this is where the most money has been spent in the corridor between the markets of Tampa and Orlando, and this is where the candidates have really gone all in. And it pretty much dictates who the next president will be. So it's all about the I-4 corridor.
Paula, we've heard so much about this surge in early votes and how crucial that might be when it comes to the turnout in Florida. What can you tell us about what you're hearing there with regards to that?
I think what you just asked me was about the early voting. 6.4 million early votes. And to put that in context, that's more than the total number of Floridians voting in 2000 when we had the infamous hanging Chad, when it was separated by 537 votes total. So 6.4 million early votes. That's half the state's population. That's extraordinary. And since 2000, we've seen voter registration, the net voter registration increased by 5 million. Since the last election cycle, it's increased by almost 900,000. But I want you guys to keep an eye on one key demographic. And of course, the students are now reacting to the states being called behind me. But one key demographic that I think everybody really needs to focus on is that early Hispanic vote. In 2012, it was comprised of about 522,000. Fast forward to this election cycle, almost double, 980,000 early Hispanic votes. And 36% of those that voted early in this election, you guys, didn't even vote in the last election. That goes to show you this is a very motivated base. Hillary Clinton's expecting them to skew heavily for her. But how interesting could it be after everything that Trump has said that really this election, this state could come down to the Hispanic vote, and ultimately the election could come down to the Hispanic vote as well.
Hey, Paula, back in 2000, part of the reason why Democrats believe they lost Florida was because of what happened with Elian Gonzalez and the Cuban Americans being very upset about that in the Miami area. Obviously, President Obama has loosened relationships with Cuba, tried to normalize those relationships. Do you have any idea whether or not that may have a similar impact in terms of the general election and Cuban Americans there in Miami?
Well, keep in mind, when Trump won Florida in the primaries, he won 66 of the 67 counties. The one county he didn't win was here in Miami-Dade, where there's a very high Cuban population. And that's one thing that you see Senator Marco Rubio, who's been able to really galvanize even the Hispanic vote and the Cuban vote, which tends to skew very GOP. He's been able to do something that Donald Trump hasn't. When you break down that Cuban vote, though, the elder Cubans are still skewing heavily GOP. see. But the younger Cubans, the sons and daughters are kind of breaking from their mothers and fathers and leaning more Democrat. So really, it's going to be so interesting to see how the Latino vote, the Hispanic vote, the Cuban vote really breaks down here, especially in southern Florida.
Paula Ferris, thank you so much. You're really in the white hot center of things, and hopefully we'll be able to come back and talk to you as the evening continues.
Oh, wait.
Yes?
Can you guys, hold on. I want you guys to say hi, Dan. Hi, Dan.
Tell them to say it like they mean it.
It didn't sound super enthusiastic. Can you have them say it like they mean it, Paula?
Wait. Okay, Dan says, say it like you mean it. Say hi, Dan. Hi, Dan.
Okay, well, that was good.
Are you happy?
I'm happy. I'm happier.
Happy?
I'm happier. Thank you, Paula.
Okay.
Much
10%
love.
happier.
Yes, exactly. I like that. Keep branding my personal brand. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you later. So, I think it's really, she's talking about the Hispanic vote. And we should, by the way, before I continue with this line of questioning, you might notice that Walt Hickey has disappeared. And Erin Schrody is here from California, a Democrat. She was the youngest at age 24 to run for Congress in the primary a couple months ago. And she's here as an ABC News analyst, and she'll be joining us off and on throughout the evening. But I was just going to say about the Hispanic vote in Florida, it's not a monolith.
No.
It's really not.
Well, not just in Florida, like nationally. I mean, we're somewhat lazy. We just go Latino. And then most people think, well, build a wall, Mexico. And it's like, well, no, that's not all of what's referred to as Latinos. And so each group has their own set of concerns. She mentioned there's a large Puerto Rican base. Well, they're not concerned about the wall going across Mexico because there's no wall stopping them from coming from Puerto Rico. When you talk about Cuban Americans,
and they have American passports.
Yeah, that's
right. Exactly. I mean, and then when you talk about the Cuban Americans, the things that they're concerned about, what President Obama did. There were many politicians on both sides of the aisle who are of Cuban descent who were not happy with what President Obama did. That may or may not become a factor tonight. But again, those policies are something very different than what Mexican Americans may be interested in, or anyone from South America. And then don't forget countries like Haiti, Dominican Republic. They're also considered Latino as well, and they have a different set of concerns that are different than what you may consider from someone else.
And I have to give ABC News so much credit for having all of those millennials rallying behind Paula, because in this election cycle, there's been a lot of concern about millennial interest, if it'll be down because President Obama is not on the ballot. And polling going into today showed that Donald Trump, despite those young people on the screen tonight, actually had lower millennial support than any Republican, including Bob Dole. I speak of myself in the third person in 1996. So that is also something I think we'll be keeping our eye on tonight in terms of exit polling. The millennial, not just who they voted for, but the actual turnout level. Were they engaged by this election or, depressed and turned off?
Which brings us to Erin, who just got her driver's license. And is a
she actually got on an airplane, so she's engaged.
So what do you people want? That's what I want to know. Because you're the second largest generation in America right now. Pretty soon you're going to start dictating policy on a much stronger level than you are right now. So what are some of the issues for your generation that are really pressing?
There are a number of them, and I think exactly what you said, it's turnout. Are we going to show up? Have they adequately addressed the issues that we care so deeply about? Jobs. We are coming out of a broken education system and going into a changing workplace. Will we have those jobs available, and do we have the skill sets necessary to fill them? Student loan and student debt. When Hillary Clinton teamed up with Bernie Sanders to put together a plan for a debt-free college, she brought a lot of those millennials on board. For people that are feeling this burden that no generation in history has felt for so long at such a high quantity. I mean, the totals are startling. Tens of thousands of dollars that an entire generation is going to carry with them through life. Climate change is big with my generation. I'm an environmentalist. That matters hugely to me, but also to a generation that's feeling the impacts of climate change. We're seeing the rising sea levels, and that's not feet. That's the increase in inclement weather and all of these disasters as we see it happen more and more. And criminal justice reform is huge for our generation, too. We have a lot of people talking about that. We're the most diverse generations ever seen. That's white, that's black, that's brown, that's all of us. I think you touched on, Latinos on the wall. Young Latinos, millennial Latinos, that sort of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump has been incredibly off-putting as well.
I always wonder, Erin, some of the things we pay attention to a lot is like the celebrity endorsements. Yeah. And we noticed, especially with Clinton and the Get Out the Vote effort, and we should point out that you've been part of that effort for the Clinton campaign as well. especially in the last week, you and I were joking about this too. You had, I mean,
does Katy Perry matter? Does anybody care?
Does that actually move the needle? Because in sheer numbers, right, millennials and baby boomers are basically equal, but baby boomers and the silent generation way outpace millennials when it comes to actual participation. Does anyone go to a Katy Perry concert and be like, well, Katy Perry thinks I should vote for Secretary Clinton, so let's
Katy
go?
Perry and Miley Cyrus showed up knocking on dorm rooms.
I saw that. It was so awkward.
But that got people excited. First of all, that took over social media. That got a lot of new first-time voters. So I'm not a first-time voter, but there are those here, ready, poised. Are they actually going to go to the polls? The way that they were giving away concert tickets to Jay-Z in Cleveland, I was doing Get Out the Vote in Ohio last week, you had to canvass. You had to walk and knock on doors, and then you got your ticket. I think that's smart. And there is a celebrity factor. There is the celebrity culture. We are obsessed and on social media, and when we see those sorts of influencers turn up, we see them so much more. I mean, last night was Lady Gaga, it was Springsteen, it was Bon Jovi, and
Madonna, right here in Washington Square Park.
Madonna, okay, but who's on the Trump side, right? You have all of those stacked.
Ted Nugent drives big numbers.
Especially for millennials.
Yeah.
Is Ted Nugent still a thing?
But here's what I don't understand, Aaron. I mean, you know, I was a young person not so long ago. I mean, it's getting longer and longer ago. And I remember I actually felt patronized by celebrity endorsements, that I care about the issues and I wanted to investigate the issues, and I didn't need celebrity gloss. In fact, it turned me off, and a lot of my friends agreed with it, whether they're on the left or the right. So I'm surprised. Maybe it's just something that it's social media, that things have changed culturally. But in my experience, young people are engaged in politics because of the issues, not because Lady Gaga did a Nazi salute, which she did last night.
We'll have to come back and see this. Speaking of celebrity influencers, our own TJ Holmes is outside. Like how I did that right there?
Name dropping.
TJ is outside on that very cool set right in the middle of Times Square with some very special guests. TJ, let's check in and see what he's doing now.
Pearson, actually the head of the foundation. Hello to you. And tell me who we have here, first of all.
You have Moby here and you have Ben.
Ben. Now, tell me about Ben's hat.
I think Marissa should tell you about Ben.
Okay, Marissa, tell me about the hat.
We have a great dog walker who found out he was going to be on ABC News and loaned it to us. So
this is a special ABC attire, is what you're telling me here. But you've brought them out, and they're going to be here with us in Times Square a little bit. These dogs, normally their job is what?
Normally their dog is to visit in hospitals or to visit in schools, helping with children that have learning issues or children that have been abused, children that are on the autism spectrum. And we work in hospitals. We did cancer research at Mount Sinai, Beth Israel, where we had the dogs there last year, and it helped cancer patients with their stress and anxiety.
Okay. Do you think the dogs could help us tonight?
Yes, they can. Absolutely.
Have you noticed, really, we talk about stress, and somebody in a hospital or somebody coming back from a traumatic injury or something like that is one type of stress. It seems strange that we would need a stress reliever, that these dogs could help us as well during an election cycle. It shouldn't have been stressful.
Well, this has been a very stressful election, and the dogs at the Good Dog Foundation have been helping people for months in de-stressing patients, and also they de-stress people at home. And I have my dogs very close to me, and I have for the past 3 or 4 months under my stress.
How can they help someone? Just a regular person. I was just talking to this young lady down here at the end, and she's said just the stress of she's fighting with friends on Facebook. She's fighting with family members, and you're seeing it constantly on TV, the bickering and the back and forth. How could a dog like this help us out? Is it just a matter of we just feel better when the dog's around?
You feel better. It lowers your blood pressure. It decreases anxiety. It's research has shown this. It also will. It's a mood elevator, and oxytocin levels are increased when you have a dog around. And research has proven this.
Now, have you used these two? I think you might have gotten hit on this a little bit, but have you used these dogs specifically for election stress relief for people?
Yes, they've been used in hospitals, and people have been, our visits to hospitals, people have been talking about how stressed they are, and family members, and also in schools, the teachers have used the dogs while they're working with children.
Okay. And how many dogs do you, and again, about the foundation, you've all been around almost 20 years now. If people don't know, you're based here in New York, and you've got 1,000 dogs, you told me?
Yes, we have 1,000 trained teams. We're in around 300 facilities in 4 states. Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut.
Doc, do we need a stress relief right now? Doc, you're shaking your head. Like, is it that? Has it really taken that kind of a toll on us?
It has. I mean, everybody has reported that so many people feel distressed because of the uncertainty. And the reality is our brains are stressed, are constantly deciding, am I safe or not safe? And always, like even if they're standing here. So it really is about understanding what stress is. And stress is any non-specific demand made on the body. And so not knowing about the election, not knowing about employment, not knowing if your candidate's going to win causes people a lot of distress.
Any more stress in this one than we've seen in previous presidential elections?
It absolutely is, and that's because of the negativity. And also social media. This has been 24/7. And so if people don't have the discipline to turn off the TV or turn off the radio, which a lot of us don't have, then it's this constant bombardment of just negativity and what am I going to do and what's going to happen to me. So, yes, this is one of the nastiest I can remember.
Doc, what do we do tomorrow morning?
Well, tomorrow morning, if your candidate won, you celebrate. And hopefully you will continue to support them. But if you lost, then like, the spirit of a good loser, you lick your wounds, you continue to focus on an issue, you continue to focus on what's closest to you, being nice to your family, getting support from your family, finding dogs that do relieve the stress that you have, and giving and volunteering, and understanding that it's a competition. Like, as human beings, we are meant to compete, but we're also meant to cooperate. So just because you're lost doesn't mean that you don't continue to help out. Well, this country needs all of us more than ever.
Okay, now, we have talked about, we have the dogs here, and this is great, and, we've been talking about how nasty the campaign has been. It's been nonstop, yes. But listening to you now, I don't want to say we're dismissive of it because, it's just politics, and these are two polarizing candidates, but listening to you, this is serious, and we need to take it seriously about the level of stress we might be under.
Well, absolutely, because what stress can increase any chronic and worsen any chronic medical condition you have, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease.
An election can do this to us.
It absolutely can, because again, your brain it's a non-specific demand that your brain's taking in, and that's why you need balance. That's why we exercise. That's why we hopefully get a good night's sleep, and that's why even the dogs, people smile, they relax, and you need that. You need to interrupt chronic stress. And so whatever it takes to do that in a healthy way, it's about healthy coping.
All right, that is our own TJ Holmes out there in the middle of Times Square, giving you a little bit of a break from this election cycle with those therapy dogs.
You should bring some of those dogs in here.
Right? Wouldn't that be nice, just right here?
Yeah.
Take the stress off.
We're surrounded by Pez and rock candy and all that stuff. Why not a few dogs?
I'm okay with all this.
Yeah.
We're also surrounded.
The candidates therapy dogs about a year and a half ago.
Yes.
And don't forget,
Feels like a good time to introduce.
Buttons from Christmas past.
Ben Lee joins us now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And Rick Klein,
hey guys.
Political Director.
That's an impressive collection of campaigns.
That is nice.
Have you been going through the buttons?
Well, I'm amazed that someone kept them all. I mean, there's an actual Santana button.
Do you even remember all these folks in there?
Do I remember? Come on, this is my life for a while. Even Jindal. I mean,
how often do you think Jeb has this and just cries with this in his hand? He's like,
exclamation point.
Yeah.
Yes,
like a little tear dropping down. Punctuation.
Hey guys, a couple of quick updates. We've got some news now, a couple more projections we can bring you from some results coming in. In West Virginia, ABC News can now project Donald Trump is the projected winner there for the 5 electoral votes in the state of West Virginia. Also over in Ohio, ABC News can project that the Senate seat will go to the incumbent, Rob Portman. He is the projected winner there. Not much of a surprise there in Ohio, right?
That was a race that Democrats hoped at some point to be able to pick off. Ted Strickland, the former governor, was running against Portman. It was only because, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, that the conventional wisdom was he didn't run a great campaign.
Yeah, this is a missed opportunity for Democrats. And Rob Portman was one of the few Republicans in the country who navigated Trump very successfully. He was able to craft his own brand. Even though the Republican convention was in Ohio, Portman didn't attend. He made it clear that he had other loyalties. And
neither the governor nor the senator from the state.
That's right.
Came to the convention.
They both kept out of that. And I think Portman had his own brand. And I think that's so important in a year when Trump was the big guy, the big brand, that if you're able to establish yourself, Portman did it better than almost else. And he'll be one of the few bright spots today. I've been talking to Republicans who are very pessimistic about their chances in the Senate, but they like to Rob Portman. That's one guy that they feel like was able to survive this wave.
Well, one of the things that was really impressive about Portman winning was the fact that he's also very positive in terms of LGBT rights. His son is openly gay. I've spoken with his son. His son penned this very emotional letter about how supportive his dad was. And then his dad comes out and says, yes, I'm not anti-gay and I'm still Republican. And so to have Republicans in that state still support him is a really good positive sign in terms of where we hope the country is going in terms of having room for each other.
Mm-hmm. It is a good sign. It just still seems, generally speaking, that Republicans in office generally only support gay rights when they have a son or daughter that is gay. That seems to be the one time that it crosses over and helps. It's always like when a celebrity gets afflicted with a disease and all of a sudden that's their cause. But nobody ever has a cause they like before it personally affects them.
Well, it's like caring about women's rights, right? Because you have a wife or a
right,
daughter.
Exactly right.
I have a daughter, so you shouldn't say that.
Yeah, sexual assault is inappropriate because I know a woman. It's like, how about some humanity?
Rick raises a really good point, which is something we've seen again and again this cycle. These, especially the few senators who were in very tight races, having to walk this very tight line between sort of like not endorsing Donald Trump but not separating themselves entirely, right, Rick?
Well, what's amazing is that there was no good way. You were damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. You had some senators, like Joe Heck out in Nevada, running for the Senate, one of the Senate candidates in Nevada. He was in both positions on this. At some point, he endorsed, then he was too close, then he was too far. Over in New Hampshire, the very popular Kelly Ayotte, the incumbent senator, has also been all over the place on this. She said at one point Trump was a role model. No, she didn't mean it. Is she going to vote? Is she going to endorse? There was no safety from this storm unless you had a very strong positive message in your own brand. So it wasn't a clear case of, I'm going to say I'm my own person, I'm going to disavow, I'm going to say I don't endorse, or I'm not going to vote. You had to do something special here to survive what looks like a Trump wave in these Senate races.
Well, there were special circumstances bouncing back and forth all the time where you almost don't fault them for adjusting because the facts on the ground just change so wildly every couple days. Even Paul Ryan, every couple days, he's like, I'm not endorsing, I am endorsing. That's definitely a definition of a racist statement. I'm back on board. It just seems like a crazy confluence of emotions.
Paul Ryan.
It was.
There was a good 2-week stretch there in which I was like, all right, I give up.
And it raises all sorts of questions about what happens to the Republican Party, no matter who wins tonight.
Yes.
Huge questions, which I'm sure will be major themes as we continue through the evening.
And also, I think that Kelly Ayotte missed a great opportunity to walk back in a more smooth way. The role model comment, she could have just said, well, a role model depends what role you're modeling. You know what I mean? There could be negative roles that you're modeling. Like, I'm sure the Hamburglar loved a guy that stole hamburgers, and he was his role model growing up. The point being, there's a wide range. Someone needs a role model for every
Everyone
position.
needs good inspiration.
So
exactly right.
All the burglars need role models.
All the people who are watching us who are
matter.
doing the when somebody says Hamburglar drink game.
Yep, that's the one.
You have that on your bingo board?
Yeah,
Those are people that are trying to ease them very slowly into drinking.
Listen, if you are playing bingo at home and you're waiting for the word email to be mentioned, the time is right now. I do want to show you some information that we have coming in from preliminary exit poll data. Of course, one of the biggest issues that we talked about again and again this election cycle that voters seem to care about was Clinton's use of the private email server. Nationwide, this is based on preliminary exit poll data, by the way. How much did it actually bother people? 45% said a lot. 19% said not at all, 18% bothered them some, and 17% said not much. On the flip side, when it came to one of the biggest issues in terms of how people looked at Mr. Trump as a candidate, his treatment of women, the way he talked about women, 51% of those polled said it bothered them a lot, all the way down to 13% saying it didn't bother them much at all. And those were kind of the two biggest issues that plagued both of the candidates again and again this cycle.
Yeah, and certainly in the case of Senator Clinton, much of it is a self-inflicted wound. Obviously, setting up the server to begin with was a one self-inflicted wound, but then spending basically an entire year making us feel dumb for asking you questions about the server didn't help. You want to talk about fueling reasons why we don't like you? Well, that would be reason number one. The way that she first joked about it, and what did she say? Scrub it clean. Yeah, I use like detergent or something to scrub it clean.
I use a cloth.
A cloth. I mean, making jokes of something that people were trying to get a hold of, and instead of answering it more earnestly, you pretty much was was condescending to the American people for much of the time, and then you come out with an apology saying, what I did was wrong, I'm very sorry. Well, you just made fun of us for a few months.
I feel like
so
she never actually explained why she set up the server in the first place.
For convenience. I think that was her only words, was for convenience.
Yeah, but does that make sense?
Which clearly, I think she'd admit now it's not convenient for her at all.
It turns out to be very inconvenient.
It was very inconvenient.
Especially on multiple devices, it really didn't sound very convenient.
That's very true.
But I think the whole notion was that, at least for a while, you had to carry like this laptop around and you had to like log in and all this stuff. I guess she thought that was the inconvenient part. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, she flies around a lot. She's flying all over the country. I'm not going to second guess whether or not she was inconvenienced with carrying the laptop or not. But what I will say is that what wasn't good was your explanation after the information came out to the American people about why you did it and whether or not you were sorry about it.
And also, two related polls that match up perfectly with the ones you just shared, Amna, are that before the campaign began, Hillary Clinton was not at all bothered by her use of a private server, and Trump wasn't bothered by his treatment of women. And then at the end of the campaign, 100% of Hillary Clinton was bothered by it, and 100% of Donald Trump was bothered by his use of language towards women.
Striking numbers.
Yeah, that's a poll that I can just with confidence say, even though it was not conducted.
We can promise that
real
throughout the evening, some guests will make up numbers out of whole cloth, and they do not represent the views of ABC News necessarily, but they might be funny.
Fair enough, but I mean, how would you argue that?
What'd you say?
How would you argue that point, though? I mean,
that's true.
Clearly, they
Fair.
both regret those decisions.
Yes. Let's get it out to Ohio, a state that we're going to be talking about a lot throughout the course of this evening. And there's my good friend Ron Claiborne. Also, we're basically populating all of our live shots tonight with people I know from Weekend Good Morning America. You're following Paula Filibuster Ferris, Ron Claiborne. Where are you in Ohio, and what can you tell us about the state of play there?
Okay, Dan, I'm in Columbus, Ohio, obviously the capital of Ohio. This is a state that was really competitive. Hillary Clinton appeared here a couple of times down the stretch, really wanting to win here, but it was a must-win state more so for Donald Trump. No Republican has ever been elected president without winning a state of Ohio, and the polls in the final days and weeks here showed Trump with a modest lead over Clinton. Now, the preliminary indications we're getting, preliminary data, is showing that that one of the groups that Trump does most strongly with, non-college educated whites, are making up a big chunk of the electorate here. That would tend to favor Donald Trump. Another problem, potential problem at least, for Hillary Clinton is, although she does very well with the African-American vote, almost by a ratio of 9-1, there are indications that the turnout of that key constituency for her will be down this year compared to 2012. In the early voting up in the Cleveland area, that vote was down by 16%. She needs that turnout if she's going to have any chance of winning this state, Dan.
And Ron, you talk about this, what appears to be maybe unsatisfactory turnout from the point of view of the Clinton team. But what about, they brought out the big guns, Jay-Z, Beyonce, they had LeBron James. Is the sense that it just failed?
Look, the final votes, literally and figuratively, are not in. They have not been counted yet. But, that was pulling out all the stops, hoping to energize that African-American vote, largely concentrated in the Cleveland area. Let me tell you a story. I was up there on Monday, the final day of early voting, and I talked to quite a few voters, including a number of African-American voters, and I was asking them about their motivation, about whether their friends and family were turning out. And the sense I got of it, and this was not a statistically valid sampling, but the sense I got from the people I spoke to, the African-American voters there, was that they were voting mostly out of a sense of duty, obligation, almost habit. I did not hear from one single person anything that could fairly be categorized as an indication of enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton. I also asked a number of those voters if they had family or friends who were not voting, who did vote 4 years ago, and every single one said they knew someone in their family or friends who were not coming out to vote this time. The vote there in Cuyahoga County down about 16%. That's 35,000 fewer voters this year than 4 years ago, a state that Barack Obama won by 150,000 votes. If those people don't show up, if that is not corrected from the Clinton point of view in the voting today, it's unlikely she can win this state, and it's 18 electoral votes.
Hey, Ron, it's Amna. I think one of my favorite sentences to hear is, let me tell you a story. So thank you for that. That's ABC's Ron Claiborne out in Columbus, Ohio for us. We hope to check back in with him for more stories and reports on the ground. From one battleground state right to another, let's head to Arizona, where ABC's David Wright joins us live now. David, tell us where you are and what's going on there.
Well, the polls have yet to close here in Arizona, but this is one of the states that Hillary Clinton is hoping to steal from the red states. It's a state that has strongly gone Republican. It's only gone Democratic twice in the past 100 years. Once was 20 years ago with Bill Clinton, and before that, you have to look back to Harry S. Truman. But the Clinton campaign has invested in this state. They are hoping to make some inroads, and if they are able to move Arizona over to the Democratic side, that will be a strong win for them.
David, what kind of impact do you think the fact that Sheriff Joe Arpaio is on the ballot will have on the Latino vote there? He's extremely controversial.
He's an extremely controversial character. He's up for re-election himself, and he has allied himself with Donald Trump, one of his strongest supporters nationally and here in Arizona, both of them passionate about that issue of immigration. And that's an issue that, of course, breaks down here along demographic lines. But you see strong support among white voters for a tougher crackdown along the border, like Sheriff Joe has long advocated and that Donald Trump has been calling for. Hispanic voters, not so much. The Democrats are hoping to boost the turnout among those Hispanic voters and also among urban voters in places like Phoenix, Tucson, Flagstaff, and hoping to balance off the strong Republican showing in the more remote areas. Dan?
David, it's LZ. In addition to television ads, what other specific things has the Clinton campaign been doing to try to attract those votes that you're talking about? What does the ground game look like? Are they knocking on doors?
There are lots of people here knocking on doors. Just across the street from us here is a hotel where a lot of Democratic operatives from outside of the state have come in specifically to try to mobilize the vote. They have fanned out across population centers like Phoenix today. The Clinton campaign has also enjoyed a windfall from unexpected places. The Arizona Republic, the newspaper here, endorsed Hillary Clinton. It is the first time that paper has endorsed a Democrat since 1890. So there is some groundswell for Clinton here, and they're hoping that their ground game can push the state in her direction.
Apparently, the paper got some threats after making that endorsement, so it's a pretty hot environment there, both literally and figuratively, I would imagine.
That is such a long time. The Chicago Cubs were like, that is a very long time.
Even the Chicago Cubs feel like that's a long time. David Wright, thank you very much for reporting in from Arizona. I suspect we'll be coming back to you frequently throughout the evening. Thank you.
Sounds good. All right, Dan.
Rick, since you know more about politics than pretty much everybody, talk to us about Hillary's chances in Arizona.
This is really 4 or 8 years too soon for the Democrats. This is about the map going down the road. And I talked to some folks in the Clinton campaign. They made a decision to travel to Arizona 2 weeks ago, and they had the
Michelle
event
too.
That's
Michelle
right.
Obama,
That's
yeah.
right. They had the events last week, and there was some talk about canceling them because it started to fade from the map. They decided to go through with it, and they had one of the biggest crowds of the entire campaign over, I think, in Tucson, and they energized these Democrats who had never seen a real life national Democrat before, and they see such demographic opportunities in Arizona. They're expecting a backlash against people like Sheriff Joe and those immigration policies. I think that's borne out in some of the polling today. 3-1 people favor a pathway to citizenship over deportation. That says Donald Trump is putting forward the wrong message.
In the exit polling.
That's right, in the exit polling. Even more wrong over time if you look at the demographics. So I think this is about the map of the future. Arizona is emblematic of a growing segment of the population, a growing share of Latino votes, and these divisions that have so riven states like Arizona increasingly will trend in Democrats' direction. I think it's going to be part of your battleground map next time.
And maybe that even wasn't. Maybe that was why they've been Republican state for a very long time. It wasn't even policy issues. They just felt slighted by nobody visiting for a long time.
That's there is something to that. I mean,
for sure. I mean,
Trump has tried to turn it in the
you
other
write
direction.
off certain states and people ignore it, and you do feel slighted.
There's no doubt about that. And I think there's a possibility there that look, the coalitions are always different, and we're seeing some really interesting things happen, and not just in Arizona, also Georgia, a fast-changing state. North Carolina has suddenly become one of the ultimate battlegrounds. Virginia could go deep blue. All of these things are happening happening in the space of 2-3 national elections. And I think there are a lot of smart Democrats who are looking out west at Nevada and Colorado and Arizona, New Mexico, which is now solidly blue, and saying this might be our future. Forget the South. Forget maybe even ultimately the upper Midwest, which could flip in the other direction.
Yeah, I was thinking about Ohio, right?
Yeah.
So no Republicans ever won the presidency without Ohio, and JFK is the only Democrat who ever did it. Is it possible we could be headed toward a future where Ohio just isn't the swing or battleground state that it has always been?
It could be irrelevant in the next election. I on my map, when I've gone through it, I think Iowa and Ohio are the two states that Obama carried that are most likely to flip over to Donald Trump. And Iowa, I think, is gone. Ohio is going to be very close tonight from everything we're seeing on the ground there. We saw the Senate race get called for the Republican already. But yes, I think the battleground states could be moving to the south and to the west. And you could see a Midwest and an upper Midwest that is increasingly going to trend toward the Republicans. A lot of these white working class voters that have been so energized by Donald Trump, those are the folks that might power a victory in some of these states.
Going forward, Rick, I've spoken to a lot of never-Trumpers over the last couple of weeks, and my question to them is always about, okay, what's the plan if he loses, right? Because the demographics aren't going to change. They're going to continue to shift in this way. We're getting browner and browner, and the population that you've been leaning on, white voters, are getting smaller and smaller. So what's your plan? From your perspective, what do you think they need to do if Donald Trump does not win so that the states that we're talking about, Arizonas of the world, they can stay red?
The worst thing that can happen to Republicans who think like that is a narrow loss tonight. They want Trump to get thumped. If he gets blown out in all of these states, and we're talking about 320 electoral votes, that's the kind of scenario where you could say, now we come in and we reclaim the party from itself. If Trump keeps it close, look, the Trump energy is not going to go away. Trump himself may not go away. I mean, it's all going to be there. Away. We know that. He's not good at going away. So all that energy is going to be there. And there's going to be a lot of folks who say, look, Trump had the right message. He was just the wrong messenger. You had to sand away some of those rough edges. That is a more problematic future for the never-Trumpers, for the moderate wing of the Republican Party, because you're seeing all these folks begin to position around it, whether it's Rubio, whether it's John Kasich, whether it's Ted Cruz. They all have different plays on what the future of the Trump movement is. But there will be an argument that, look, we were wrong on immigration for a large portion of the country. He was obviously out there with an offensive message to women as well as Latinos. Asian Americans, a growing segment of the population. We need to get that message right. But I think the Trump forces are going to push back.
I would even say he wasn't sending an offensive message. He was an offensive message to women. Once you string together all the things that he said over the years with Howard Stern, things he said in Playboy magazine, and et cetera.
What sort of electoral thumping do you think Donald Trump needs to concede easily tonight and actually try to rally his troops behind healing the country?
So that's the biggest question that I've seen posed with people I've talked to in the last couple of days. What scenario does Trump concede? Because clearly, if the electoral math is what it is, he's not going to stick around and pretend like there's a fight. Wouldn't think. We don't really know with him. I think.
How good is your track record at predicting what
I am
Trump is going to do?
100%. No, I've been so wrong. Listen, guys, I've admitted it on your air. I've been so wrong about this guy.
But some of the sources, that I've spoken to have said that some of his inner circle haven't shown him all the polls that shows him losing.
Well, it helps that they took his Twitter away.
And they took his
Twitter. He can't.
How did they do that? Did they just change his password without his knowledge? How did that occur?
We should say it's reported that they took his Twitter away. But I think they just take his mobile device away.
No, I think they'll do anything during the stretch. Look, Republicans have looked at the data throughout this election, have said this is very, very tough. You can spin it any way you want. Ultimately, when they looked at the final polls, they say there has to be this kind of magical pro-Trump bubble that's not being caught by exit polls or all the pre-election polls. They're going to come out in force, and they're going to power through, add 2 or 3 points. I heard this argument from the former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, back at the convention. He was arguing at the time we're winning. I do think that Trump believed that to some extent. And we'll see how it plays out tonight.
And I think that there must be a decent chunk, we of course will see, but a decent chunk of this hidden Trump vote, because even just as a small anecdote, I was just in Boston doing stand-up comedy this last weekend, and I was talking with a friend of mine who lives there. I stayed with him one night, and he's always been a very liberal guy. And he said to me after the show, he's like, by the way, I think I'm going to vote for Trump. And I didn't expect that from him ever out of his mouth. And so,
he just said that so he wouldn't stay in his place.
Maybe so.
He had
I did make a mess.
He's like, now go home now.
I did make a mess. That's fair.
I wonder, though, if there's also going to be in this election a hidden Clinton vote. We're seeing a record share of the population in our exit polls that are college-educated white women, 20% of the country. And I wonder how many of them wouldn't wear the H pin or wouldn't say I'm with her on social media.
Maybe because their husbands wouldn't like it.
Because their husbands may have a great Make America Great hat on or a sign in the lawn, but they...
Not just that. I think these days you get all kinds of comments thrown at you all on social media, in public, wherever, just for kind of speaking out about what you believe in, regardless of what you believe. I don't think it necessarily has to do with a relationship to a man that they wouldn't necessarily say, I'm voting for Hillary. But it just...
that's very disempowering.
Well, I'm taking that from Kristen Soltis Anderson, a Republican pollster, who said on one of our earlier live streams about when we were talking about when we were covering one of the debates, I was asking her whether is it possible that the polling is missing, is there a hidden Trump vote, that people don't want to admit that they're, she said actually she was echoing what you just said, which is that actually there may be a hidden Clinton vote because she painted the scenario of a woman answering the phone, her husband's in the other room, she doesn't want to say I'm with her.
I think it's also when you have two deeply disliked candidates, as much as these two candidates are, no one's really proud of how they're casting their ballot.
It has been so...
I shouldn't say no one. A lot of people aren't very proud.
Don't make up statistics. I've been yelled at.
That's my job. You were cheered at a snide wake.
Oh, okay, good. Fair enough. Fair enough. But that really is a true concern because it's been so vitriolic on both sides in this campaign that even people who are making the argument that the other side is so horrible and vitriolic and hateful is making that point in such vitriolic and hateful ways oftentimes, not just on Twitter, but in person. You see these scuffles break out at rallies on both sides that it really does seem like there probably is more of an X factor than you would expect.
And we're forgetting the fact that this is an opportunity to make history. And for a lot of people, voters I've spoken to, particularly women, they look and they go, yeah, we don't like either one of them. But this is a qualified woman running against a man, according to the polls, that most Americans do not think is qualified, and they're neck and neck, and they're like, why?
Yeah.
It's got to be the gender thing. I'm sick and tired of this. And they're casting their vote for Hillary because they want a female president.
Well, speaking of making history, we are making history right here tonight on the live streams because we've got some other things, if you're watching on an ABC News digital channel, that you can absolutely tune over to if you just need a break from all of this right here. I don't know why you would. So take a look at a couple of the other options.
I was going to ask if we had puppies. We got puppies again.
I promise you puppies, and I give you...
I would look at the puppies.
We're still puppies.
These are our political pups, courtesy of our friends over at the North Shore Animal League America in New York. These are adorable. Look at them. I think they have blue and red collars on, too. They're just all patriotic.
See,
that's
lovely. This is how it's done, Congress. You see them getting along well?
So, that's how it is. They have red and blue collars, so whichever one pees on the White House in the background first, that indicates who will be president of the United States of America.
That's the word independent in the group.
Why don't we have a kitten cam?
Really, Dan?
Strong question.
Really?
Seriously.
He wants species equality.
Come on.
That's fair.
Who speaks for the cats? So look, that's on one of our other live channels if you want to hop over and take a break with those cute little pups. Also happening right here in Times Square, caricature artist Kathy Nolan is hanging out there doing some caricatures of folks who are out there gathered to watch the results come in along with the candidates. So it looks like this gentleman is having his picture drawn with Mr. Trump. So if you're in Times Square, you can go to
is that a Trump supporter, or because it's a caricature, he wants a ridiculously drawn huge Trump to be funny? You don't know.
We don't know. We can't speculate.
We could, but then it would be inaccurate.
I'm a fan of speculation, but again, that is just me and my lack of journalistic standards. But that's why we have all of you guys here with a little bit more integrity about the things you say than I do, so it's fine.
I'm glad you know your role here, Ben Gleave. That's nice.
Nobody's coming to me for the exact electoral numbers. I'm aware of that.
Speaking of exact electoral numbers.
Yeah, let's get it out to North Carolina because Lindsay Davis is standing by. Lindsay, you can tell us a little bit, hopefully, about the extended voting hours that we're seeing in the state?
Yes, hopefully. I can tell you a little bit about that. But yes, so 7:30 was supposed to be the time that the polls were going to close throughout the state of North Carolina. But there were a few problems this morning at a few of the locations in Durham County specifically. They are calling them computer glitches. And for various reasons, they had to then basically shut down voting for a period of time. So they're allowing people to come back at this point. They're giving them, in some cases, a half hour, in some cases, an hour to still make sure that they get their votes in. But this this race in North Carolina, so much going on here in the Tar Heel state. I'm calling it the tight trifecta because you not only have a tight Senate race, you have a tight governor race, you have a tight race for president. So in the most recent polls, and I think as the votes are coming in now, it's bearing out the same. There's a tie, essentially, so tight here between Clinton and Trump, and this really is the epitome of a swing state, right? Because you had North Carolina vote for Mitt Romney in 2012, then they voted for President Obama in 2008, and largely what helped President Obama in 2008 was that large black voter turnout, and the thought is that Hillary Clinton would need a repeat of the same in order to win the state of North Carolina. But based on early voting, just early voting alone, the black voter turnout down 9 points compared to where it was in 2012, again, a year that President Obama lost in North Carolina. Let's take a look at the Senate race. So this is considered one of the core four, right? Because as everybody knows, Democrats have to win at least 4 seats in order to take control of the majority in the Senate, and Democrats are certainly looking very closely at the state of North Carolina because they think that they have a very good chance of doing it here. Then let's look at the governor's race. So you have an incumbent Republican governor, and the thought is that there could be a referendum. Let's see some good news, apparently, for the Democrats coming in now. But the thought is there could be a referendum on the governor's, the notorious or controversial, polarizing bathroom bill that many say has cost the state billions of dollars. Some estimate as much as $5 billion. Of course, you had the NCAA pull out, NBA All-Star Weekend pulled out, PayPal, ACC, number of different tourism that's gone down, but there's just been a major backlash.
Lindsay, thank you. It's 8 o'clock, and we have a bunch of polls closing in a bunch of states, and we want to run through for you the states in which ABC News can project a winner. And we're going to start with Delaware, where Hillary Clinton is, according to ABC News, the projected winner. Moving on now to the District of Columbia. Again, Hillary Clinton, the projected winner in that state. And in Maryland, with 10 electoral votes, Hillary Clinton projected the winner. No huge surprises thus far. As we move to Massachusetts, always a blue state, my home state, often referred to as the People's Republic of Massachusetts. Hillary Clinton, the projected winner in that state as well. Moving on to Mississippi, deep red, 6 electoral votes there. Donald Trump, according to ABC News, the projected winner in that state. New Jersey, Hillary Clinton, the projected winner there. And in Oklahoma, with its 7 electoral votes, Donald Trump, the projected winner. Rhode Island, with its 4 electoral votes, Hillary Clinton, the projected winner. And Illinois, with 20 electoral votes, Hillary Clinton projected as the winner. And that's all we have in terms of results for right now.
No surprises.
But no huge surprises. But the evening is progressing. And at 8 o'clock, we should say the big kahuna, the polls closed in Florida. And we will know at some point, presumably, who has won there. And as we've discussed, if Donald Trump cannot put together a victory in the state of Florida, it's going to be very hard, if not impossible, for him to put together a victory nationwide.
But as Amna pointed out, coverage will continue.
Yeah, we're here, guys. Stay with us.
Yes.
Even
Don't go away.
that
I'm from
happens,
Florida.
we'll be here.
Walt Hickey rejoins us.
How's it going, y'all?
We cannot overstate the importance of Florida when it comes to today, right?
We actually cannot, no. So, again, if you look at the paths that Donald Trump has to the White House, they all go through Ohio for the most part. There's a few ways that you can finagle the map, but really they go through Ohio. And you have the same deal with North Carolina. You have the same deal with Florida. Again, you look at Florida, when we looked at the simulations from this past Monday where Donald Trump ended up winning the presidency, he won the state of Florida in 93% of them, right? So you can construct a map, absolutely, that doesn't require the state of Florida in order for Donald Trump to win. It's just real hard to at that point. So it's a hugely consequential state. We talk about North Carolina, and we talk about Florida. They both had about less than a point in Clinton's favor if you average the polls up through the end of when we stopped looking at polls in our model this morning. So real tight. Again, there's a really consequential Senate race in North Carolina right now, and Marco Rubio, again, trying to maintain his seat in the Senate in Florida. So we're getting into the exciting part of the evening.
And that's a big story in Florida because Rubio is going to outperform Donald Trump very significantly, particularly in Miami-Dade County, the most populous county, heavily Latino county. We could be looking at Rubio beating Trump Trump by 10-plus points. When we talked earlier about what the future of the Republican Party could hold, there it is, someone who went out on a limb, obviously against Trump, in favor of comprehensive immigration reform, goes back to his state after a late start. The Democrat had a big head start against him. And if he's able to pull out a decisive victory at the same time Trump either loses or struggles, that's going to be a big story. And guys, Trump is already lashing out at his party. He was on a radio interview just tonight talking about Lindsey Graham and President Bush and how ridiculous they were for not supporting him. You're seeing this, the internal warfare that always happens after a campaign. It was all out in the open before the campaign this time. And even tonight, we're still far from calling the presidency here. There are lots of battleground states out there where the polls are still open. He's fighting with his own party and starting to blame them for not supporting him.
Did he say anything more about whether he'll accept the results?
He has said, we'll see. And you were asking about my Trump radar on this question. I don't know what the number is. I would presume that there is one in his head and his aide's head. And ultimately, maybe it's his kids, maybe it's his someone has to be able to say, look, Mr. Trump, it was a good fight. We cannot win. We cannot win. It's not about recounts. It's not about trying to keep your coalition together. And if you can make that case to him, then that's the situation where he goes out tonight.
I'm wondering who's going to be that whisperer.
Ivanka? Maybe
who's the Trump whisperer? You know, we talked about North Carolina and its importance, and it appears as if the African-American vote, at least up to now, seems to be down. It's a little bit of surprise to me because when you saw the headlines and how overtly racist some of the policies were in terms of voter suppression in North Carolina, I would have thought the rebellion would have been where we're going to show up in even greater numbers. But that speaks again to how little Hillary Clinton seems to inspire so many vital members of her own base.
Yeah, I think the story tonight is going to be a changed country, but one that Hillary didn't motivate substantially back in another direction. I think you'll see a slightly more diverse electorate, but about where the Democrat. What do you think, Walt? I mean, this is to me one of the big questions coming tonight. Is this the Latino giant waking up, or is this just a natural demographic change in the country?
Yeah, or is this what happens when one candidate consistently says things that one part of the population views as deeply offensive?
We spend a really good amount of time, and absolutely worthwhile, talking about, again, the Latino giant waking up finally, the depressed African-American vote in the state of North Carolina. But the women vote has been fascinating so far with what we've seen in the exit polls. Again, if you go to 538, my colleagues have looked at the exit poll results from the states of Virginia and the states of North Carolina. And what we've essentially found is that Hillary Clinton had a 19-point advantage among women in the state of Virginia. If you compare that to 2012, Barack Obama had a 9-point advantage. Right? In the state of North Carolina, she's got a 13% point advantage with women. And then if you compare that to, again, 2012, a 2-point advantage for Barack Obama. So this is there's a lot of giants waking up today.
There are so many numbers on these index cards, by the way, guys. Like, if you can't see, this is scary.
No, that's beautiful.
What's going on?
We drew the country.
Wait,
We drew the country.
No,
I printed the
country.
Do not take his card away from
Including
him.
Alaska and Hawaii.
Do not take his cards away from him. There's a lot more we need to unpack there. We've been talking so much about the divides across the country, though. We have a couple of boards to show you now that speak to some of those considerations. This is based on preliminary exit poll data. Again, just in Pennsylvania, in terms of Clinton voters, when we're looking at where they live, where Clinton voters live in the state of Pennsylvania, you can see there a divide from West Pennsylvania, 27%, from the suburbs, 26%, the city, of course, of Philadelphia, 20%, and then in central and northeast, more rural parts of the state, lower percentages there. For Trump voters, of course, we're seeing a bit of a flip there. Central Pennsylvania supporters make up 31% of his support in the state. Western Pennsylvania, 29%, Northeast, 20%, and then the Philly suburbs and Philadelphia, more urban areas, down to 17% and 4%. And of course, education is the other big divide we have looked at again and again this cycle, just in the state of Pennsylvania. And again, this is just preliminary exit poll data. For Clinton voters, white college-educated voters make up 41% of her voters there in Pennsylvania. White with no college degree, that's no four-year college degree, 28%. Non-white, no college degree, 20%. And non-whites with a college degree, 11%. On the flip side, for Mr. Trump, we've been seeing this again and again, right, Waldicki? White voters with no college degree, 56% of Trump supporters there in the state of Pennsylvania, all the way down to non-white voters without a college degree, making up just 2%. This is not unique to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, absolutely. This is how he's galvanized his base. This is how he became the Republican nominee. He found a community in both the Democratic Party, in the both independent community, and within the Republican Party itself that really resonated with his message, right? So again, we kind of expected to see this. This is something that we've seen before. We saw it in the primaries. Again, he did very, very well in states, even if they were blue states. He did very well in the areas that are, again, have large populations of white men with no college degree. Again, there's a lot of communities that have been left behind by the progression of the American economy so far. And this is just a topic that his issue here has resonated so significantly with them, and we always kind of expected that this would kind of carry through.
I think one of the questions is if he does not prevail tonight, how does Hillary Clinton reach out to this segment of the population?
Well, she's going to have to spend a lot of time threading a needle, because when you talk about criminal justice reform, you have the Black Lives Matter aspect of the conversation, but then you also have the part of the conversation where you have those whites who are looking, going, just follow what the cop says. Look at the crime rate in the black community. So she has to find a way, if she wants to do something like criminal justice, which is a huge issue for millennials, but also is one of those few bipartisan issues that she can actually begin to work on early if she were to win. You got to find a message that doesn't alienate those non-college whites. And I don't know if she will be in a position to do that. The Democrats have been hemorrhaging this voter bloc for much longer than her. President Obama saw a decline in those numbers as well. There's something about the message in terms of inclusiveness and diversity that the Democrats have that, for whatever reasons, is being registered as not for me if you're a non-college white.
Well, it's about diversity, but it comes back again and again to economics, right? It comes down to resources and to money, which is where it hits home for a lot of people. And we know that over the last several decades, if you do not have a college degree, which is a smaller percentage of the American population than it is, in decades past, but if you don't, you have seen your wages decrease. Whereas if you do have a four-year college degree, you've seen your wages go up. So that's a very real thing for people, which has nothing to do with race or ethnicity or anything else. It's just about where it hits home for you.
Except in some ways it does have to do with race, because again it goes to the messaging, right? So if you are, say, a white person and you're in rural Virginia, for instance, or West Virginia, and you're turning on the television and you're hearing about how advantaged you are, and these are the disadvantaged people, and that you have it so much better than minorities, but you're poor and you can't keep food on your table and you haven't found a job in 7 or 8 months, that message is not resonating with you. So she's got to find a way, if she were to win, and the Democrats as a party have got to find a way to communicate that just because we're saying that this part of society has been overlooked, that we haven't forgotten about you. Trump has tapped into that energy with people who feel forgotten. And he may not necessarily have the policies, but at least he has the sensibilities to speak to them.
As you said, she's going to have a very difficult needle to thread here. Let me just cut this conversation short just a little bit, because we do have some news in some key Senate races. In Illinois, ABC News can project the winner. This would be the first seat of the night where the Democrats are picking up one from the Republicans. Tammy Duckworth, who has been a member of the House, prevailing in that race. And this is another big one. Marco Rubio, who we've been discussing throughout the evening, we can project that he will win in his re-election campaign in the state of Florida. So let's get it over to you, Walt. How do these two races match up with what 538 was projecting?
Totally consistent so far. Again, these are the early races that get called in that, again, the Democrats pretty much pulled out of Florida in a lot of ways a couple weeks back so that they can allocate their resources in other states like Pennsylvania. I know we were talking earlier about the presidential race in the state of Pennsylvania, but there's a fascinating Senate race going on. It could be, based on our model so far, there's a 10% chance that it's the one that tips the Senate one way or the other, right? We've got really interesting races. Again, we've already talked about North Carolina, but in Pennsylvania, again, you've got Katie McGinty. She's running against incumbent Republican Senator Pat Toomey, and that could very well be one of the ones that helps either bolster a Democratic majority and makes that navigation of the post-election America a little bit easier for Hillary Clinton, the one that throws it to Hillary Clinton, which again could be the one that makes the Senate resonate with her policies, or the one that prevents it from going to that and potentially bolstering a Trump presidency in the upper chamber of the legislature.
I also just want to point out we've projected that Tammy Duckworth is going to win that Senate seat there. She's a double amputee and Iraq War veteran, and I believe now the second Asian American female senator ever, after Senator Hirono. So.
I've interviewed her before. She's a very interesting person, and her backstory it's hard to argue that it's not compelling.
It was a fascinating race because the Human Rights Campaign, the largest LGBT rights organization in the world, basically, actually endorsed her opponent, which was really interesting. Was very upsetting to a lot of people in the LGBT community. And it wasn't until recently when her opponent made some racist statements about her Asian American heritage, in which HRC withdrew its endorsement, and perhaps that was a boost to her that got her over the top.
One of the reasons that tonight in general is kind of skewed a bit towards Democrats when it comes to the Senate map is, if you'll remember, these are the senators who were elected 2 years into the Obama presidency, and that immediate reaction to both the Obamacare, the first 2 years, and all that. So these are senators who have a vastly GOP bent, even in states where it's not necessarily the case, such as Senator Kirk in Illinois. And one of the reasons that he was able to obtain that endorsement is a lot of times these folks do play very much towards the center. It just seems like this is not that night.
Of course, 2 years from now, it's going to be tough for the Democrats when a lot of people are going to be up for re-election in what could be the first midterm vote of Hillary Clinton presidency, which almost always goes against the party.
That's right. Speaking of interesting Senate races to watch, Mary Bruce is in the state of Wisconsin, where there's another tight Senate race we've been keeping a close eye on. Mary, bring us up to speed on what's happening there.
Hey, guys. Well, yeah, this has been a real nail-biter of a Senate race here, and kind of unexpectedly so. You have the incumbent Republican Senator Ron Johnson in a rematch against Russ Feingold. Now, he won that seat from Feingold back in 2010. Now, tonight, Feingold is hoping to take it back from him. This was a race that a lot of people kind of gave up on early. They thought that this was going to be Feingold's for sure. That race has tightened significantly in the last few weeks as you've seen a real infusion of cash coming Ron Johnson's way. He's put out a lot of new ads. He's been boosted by a lot of help from big Republicans. In fact, just last night we were out at one of his last campaign rallies, and he had brought out all of the big dogs. He was with House Speaker Paul Ryan. He had Governor Scott Walker, the Lieutenant Governor, everybody coming in to try and give Ron Johnson that last-minute boost. Now, whether or not it will work, well, remains to be seen. We're going to have to wait a couple more hours here to see exactly what happens. But I have to say, if Johnson doesn't win, you have to wonder if he'll be thinking whether Republicans didn't come out for him soon enough. I asked him that question last night. Does he wish that the Republicans had started giving him some cash a little bit sooner? And he said, well, yeah, it certainly would never have hurt would never have hurt to have more help sooner.
Well, Mary, you seem to be in Paul Ryan's hometown. Is that correct?
I am just a couple blocks from Paul Ryan's home. We are here in Janesville, Wisconsin. I have to tell you, Janesville is lovely. If you haven't been here, it is a very, very nice town. But this is definitely Paul Ryan country. And also, I must say, Russ Feingold, he grew up here as well. There's something about Janesville that creates pretty great politicians. They went to the same high school. It's pretty remarkable when you walk around this town and talk with people. Everyone pretty much has a personal connection to one of them, if not both of them.
Well, Paul Ryan famously lost his hometown in 2020 to President Obama. Are we looking at a repeat here with Clinton and Trump?
It's interesting. So we are at what will be, what is expected to be a Paul Ryan victory party here tonight. You forget he, of course, is up for re-election just like every other member of the House. But despite the fact that he's going to win here tonight, his own race, surprisingly, is basically the least of his concerns tonight. Paul Ryan's political future is absolutely on the line here, no matter who wins the White House. Tomorrow morning, when Paul Ryan wakes up, he is going to be facing the daunting task of trying to unite a bitterly divided Republican Party. And remember, he's getting a lot of pushback already for his waffling, shall we say, his tense, tumultuous relationship with the top of his own ticket. A lot of Republicans are going to be, we pretty much already heard, will be pointing the finger at Paul Ryan if Donald Trump loses tonight. Now, they could challenge his speaker. That's something that people have already been bringing up, that they could challenge his speakership, although Paul Ryan and his team insist that he will still be speaker next week.
All right, that is ABC's Mary Bruce live for us in Wisconsin. Fascinating storyline there with Paul Ryan. We could talk about that for a whole another hour.
That's a miniseries.
Yeah, psychodrama for sure.
HBO miniseries. Well, cursing and stuff in it.
Hey, a little bit of news to bring you guys. We've got a couple more projections we can share with you now back on the presidential level. South Carolina, ABC News can now project Donald Trump will win those 9 electoral votes there with 58% of the vote. And also in Tennessee, it looks as if Donald Trump is the projected winner there with 71% of the vote. Those electoral votes, 11 electoral votes going to Mr. Trump.
So it's 8-18 almost. We have not projected any winners in any interesting states as of yet.
I think some of those states will be offended by your words.
Well,
Florida isn't anything interesting. All right.
Let me.
Tennessee. No one's interested in Tennessee. Kentucky. Who's interested in Kentucky?
What I mean is no battlegrounds. No battlegrounds.
Right, okay.
Thank you for embarrassing me on live internet. LZ.
I'm just fighting for the little man.
Keep fighting the good fight.
But you're right. There's some big projections ahead. Stay with us. Of course, we're going to bring you all those as they happen live right here. Walt, no surprises there. But next up, who do we have our eye on in terms of the next potential projection?
I mean, it's really still all about Florida.
Right?
Yeah. Again, this North Carolina is exciting to watch because those are the two races in that state are canaries in the coal mine for the rest of the country, right? If Clinton can win in the state of North Carolina, that bodes very, very well for her performance in other swing states that are kind of been toeing the line the whole time. It could bode well for her in Ohio, even potentially. Again, we don't really know how much these states kind of have the similar DNA together, but the idea is that if she does well in North Carolina, that's a good sign for her in the rest of the country. If Donald Trump does well in North Carolina, it's also a potentially good sign. I mean, it doesn't mean that he's going to win Virginia, but it does mean that he's still in this game, right? Whereas at the same time, that Senate race that's another one that's right on the line. It's a coin flip at this point. So that could really give us a lot of indication of which is going either way. But now that Florida's coming up, right, I think it's going to be really interesting to look at how the early vote squares with, again, the 2008 election. Again, my colleague Harry Enton recently tweeted out that, again, Clinton appears to be blowing away Donald Trump in the Miami-Dade County, right? So how that state ends up kind of coming down and which areas of the state end up really delivering significantly. Again, it's only the early vote, and the early vote skews towards Dems in this point. Once we start getting more data in, again, we'll be able to have a consistent point. So folks who are kind of seeing big numbers for one team or the other at this moment, keep your skepticism for the time being. There's a reason that these haven't been called yet.
Let me ask you guys a question. There was a lot of talk going into tonight about sort of a trifecta of concerns around the voting, that there would be either voter intimidation, hacking, or terrorism. Was that all just people freaking? Was it Y2K kind of all over again, or did we dodge a bullet here?
Well, there certainly were tweets that were being sent out by official people who were saying, if you are experiencing any sort of intimidation, these are the numbers to contact or to call. But I personally have not seen any credible reports of that actually happening.
Yeah, we've heard of some technical difficulties in certain places.
Those happen every time, though.
Right?
Yeah.
And we've yet
I
to
saw
have
it when I went to vote today on the
that.
Upper West Side of Manhattan. It was just one snarl of technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Really long lines and people who didn't seem interested.
I mean, one squirrel walks on the wrong power line, and all of a sudden you can't vote digitally anymore for 20 minutes, right? Like, honestly, these things happen all the time. As for massive irregularities, I haven't really seen anything quite yet.
No. We haven't seen anything on the reportable level. Of course, if we do hear something, we'll bring it to you. But, for all the talk about rigged elections, whether the system is rigged or the process itself is rigged or whatever you believe, the real rigging in any sense is happening in the way of voter suppression when it comes to certain key states. And what we've seen again and again, especially we've talked a lot about North Carolina, its importance in this cycle. But, that the bill that they passed back in 2013, which seemed to exclusively target African-American votes, which have been growing in years prior, of course, came out in record numbers in 2008, by getting rid of early voting, by limiting out-of-precinct voting, by getting rid of pre-registration for teenagers. The fact the appeals court had to go back and say, no, this actually targets a specific community, that is African Americans, with surgical-like precision, and strike it back down. I mean, those are the real efforts we have to be concerned about.
And then you saw the emails that sort of confirmed that they knew what they were doing. So it wasn't as if the judge pointed some things out there like, oh, wow, we didn't see that. It was like, oh, no, this is what we designed it for. Right. I mean, it's more than 80% of the state legislative seats are being elected on tonight around the country. More than 80%. We're talking about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and yes, they are important characters to this miniseries. But in terms of your everyday life, local politics, your state reps, those are the people who are making laws, who are deciding whether or not money's going to be spilled for roads, whether or not you're going to have early voting. Those seats are just as important. So when you talk to people and they talk so much about Bill and Hillary, it's important that they also know that, or not Bill and Hillary, look at me, I already got them swooped in, Trump or Hillary. It's important to remember that there are a lot of initiatives and, of course, these state seats that are just as, if not more important, that are also part of the down ballot that's going to shape this narrative going forward.
So write that down for 4 years from now. Okay, you probably already voted at the moment, but be sure to care about your state senator.
Well, I mean, the polls are still open out west.
Yes,
so,
most definitely.
Hey, guys, one little piece of news I can tell you about is we do have a state where we can project a winner, and it's Alabama. Donald Trump, again, unsurprisingly, the projected winner in the state of Alabama, which
Very
we have
interesting
known.
state.
An interesting state by many metrics, not, however, by the electoral math metric, LZ Granderson. On my page.
You got the full name.
Because I love you, Dan.
No,
Because
I love you right back.
You know, the thing that's really fascinating with this, obviously no one's surprised that he's winning Mississippi or Alabama. These are the states that once upon a time Ted Cruz thought he was going to lock up because it was considered part of the Bible Belt. And he was supposed to have been the benchmark in terms of being the conservative Christian Republican. And so when Donald Trump won these states, it really turned the narrative for Cruz and pretty much said, you're not going to win. I think going forward, the thing that's going to be really fascinating is about how do evangelicals identify now. Because if you got behind a person like Donald Trump, who for the most part has not been consistent in terms of the type of candidate that you've supported in the past, what exactly are you saying about your voter bloc now?
Well, I think their rationale really was about the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But it is hard to jibe some of his public and private, ostensibly private comments that were then made public about other members of the human race with things that, for example, Jesus might have said in the Bible.
Right.
Guys, we're going to come back to this in just a second. We've got some folks out there in TV land who are going to be joining us shortly. Let's give them a second to join in. We're going to pick up right back where we left off. Hey, a big welcome to all you folks out there and from our affiliates who are joining us. You are watching ABC News' digital coverage of Election Night 2016.
We should explain that we just panned off of presidential Pez on the camera.
Which is very important.
Yeah,
By the way, where
is
else
it?
will
There
you
it is, back
get
there. We have
presidential Pez?
From, would you like some James Monroe Pez, Cokie Roberts?
I prefer Madison.
You do? Well, I might be able to find that.
Madison's gluten-free.
Actually, I have Madison right here, as a matter of fact. Calling your bluff. It does have
They
candy
are
in
there,
it.
Phil.
Absolutely.
May I offer you one, Cookie?
Sure.
Hand that down like Cokie as you wait for your
Pass the
Pez.
Madison.
Has anything you've seen tonight surprised you yet?
Not yet, but there probably are some surprises ahead. One of the things we are seeing in Florida is looking very, very close, and that could mean we have a long night ahead. And the other thing that we are seeing there, though, is Marco Rubio appears to have been reelected to the Senate with a sizable portion of the Hillary Clinton vote. And one of the things that has been true in recent years is we haven't seen much ticket splitting. And so if we're going to see some of that tonight, that would be something to surprise.
Does a Rubio win bode well for Trump?
It probably bodes better for Trump than a Rubio loss would be, right?
Going into ticket splitting a bit, if you're a Senate candidate in another state, are you excited by the Rubio win, or who benefits the most across the country from that?
If you're a Republican candidate in another state, you expected Rubio to win. If Rubio had lost, you'd be panicked.
Yeah.
But I don't think that does anything one way or another because it was so much expected. But there's some other Senate races we're looking at that at the moment are appearing quite close. But it's one of those nights where anything could really happen. And for a while I thought it might not be true, but now I think it is true.
Do you think this win symbolizes some sort of resurrection of Marco Rubio, the national politician? Because he went out in a blaze of unglory, thanks largely because of Chris Christie.
Right, exactly.
Who now seems to be going out himself in a blaze of unglory. But at least Rubio has a seat in the Senate for.
Yeah, he does have. He'll have a seat in the Senate, even though he says he hated it. And he is still a young, attractive person who speaks to the future. And the fact is that the Hispanic vote in Florida was not, at least as far as we can tell, not hugely up, but up some. And he is much more in the pattern of the people who came out of the 2012 election saying we do need to reach out and not we need to come in and just talk to our base. And that and so that should mean that he has a future.
This issue we've talked about again and again, though, the inclusivity of the changing demographics of America, they have a lot of work to do on both sides.
A lot of work to do, a huge amount of work to do, absolutely. And it looks like nationally that the non-white vote will probably be about 30%, which is the highest it's ever been. And it is not a Republican vote. I think that's fair to say.
Is there anything going forward that Hillary Clinton can do over the next, assuming she wins, over the next 3 years to bridge that gap? I mean, we've talked a lot about this being a divided country. We're talking about the browning of America. We're talking about this 30% not being Republican, but there's still a very large white, particularly those without college education.
Elsie, we're going to come back to this in just a second. I just want to say thank you. There's more. Thank you to all our friends out there from Affiliate Land who joined us. We will be right back here at your next commercial break with more analysis and live results. Stay with us right here. And we're back here continuing coverage of Election Night 2016. This is a conversation we could have for hours and hours, how these parties move forward come November 9th.
But wasn't LZ in the middle of asking a paragraph-long question?
Yes, I was. Yes, I was, because context is important. Life is not black or white, my friend. It's called nuance. So, asking my nuance question, what can she do, since she's going to have the 30% that's non-white, what can she do, particularly with those without a college education, to bring them into the fold, or at least to work with them?
Well, first of all, we don't know that she's going to win, so we start there.
Right.
But I think that really, to some degree, that it's not winnable. There's no way of bringing people who are the people who are disaffected from the Democratic Party because of their economic situation, because they think that the changing demographics and the changing culture of the country have left them out. I don't think they're going to be Democrats. But can they be people who feel good about some things going on in the government? Sure. I mean, there are programs that could be enacted that could hire these people. If the infrastructure spending gets jacked up, that can make a tremendous difference in terms of hiring and just make you feel better about your roads and airports and such. And so, there are things that you can do to ameliorate it, but they're not going to be Democrats.
Cokie Roberts, thank you very much for joining us. We asked you so many questions, you didn't get a chance to eat your James Madison Pez.
I know.
You can take it with you as a parting gift.
I don't see any candy.
You open it up. There's definitely candy in there. You can offer some to George Stephanopoulos when you go back upstairs.
Oh, that's the candy.
There you go.
Okay, thank
remember,
you.
it's gluten-free.
No, we can't
We got
do
a
that.
pile of Virginians over there, seriously.
But you can't separate him from all the others.
Yes, you can.
True.
If you're Cokie Roberts, you can separate him as much as you want.
Father of the Constitution. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Cokie.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
See you all later.
Yes,
guys,
I hope so.
Some more projections to bring you right now. In the state of Indiana, looks as if Todd Young is the winner there with 56% of the vote. That is the projected winner right there in the state of Indiana. Indiana is another one we've been paying close attention to.
I've been dinged for calling states interesting or uninteresting, but this is an interesting race because Evan Bayh, a lot of people thought was going to be somebody who could snag a Senate seat for the Democrats. He is a man with massive name recognition in the state of Indiana. He was widely loved, but he ran a campaign in which his opponent apparently fairly successfully sort of tarred him as a Washington politician. At one point, apparently Biden didn't even remember his address in Indiana. So here we go.
This was constantly an interesting race the whole time. This is not inconsistent with what we kind of expected towards the end. Again, Young had a very large increase in the polls. There was, again, recent incidents that just, again, Indianans appear to start breaking for Young pretty quick towards the end. But this is very interesting just because, again, it took a little while for them to actually call that race. Generally speaking, in Indiana, the results do come pretty slowly. So the fact that that wasn't decided very quickly, it means that this might be a later night for the Senate watchers. Essentially, that was a kind of a consequential race. For the Democrats, it's not a win, clearly, but they were able to distract a lot of resources to the state of Indiana that otherwise would have gone to other more competitive areas. And while originally they had a different candidate coming up before Bai stepped in, this was, again, it was a bit of playing defense, right?
Well, let's head back out into the field right now. Our own Nikki Batiste is out there talking to some, I believe, some college friends of Secretary Clinton. Let's listen into that conversation now.
Persona that's described by too many people because she's
the Hillary you know is not what we see on TV.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. To me, it's the big lie.
Yeah, sorry, we're going to move a little bit closer.
It's a big lie. You say the same inaccurate thing over and over and over and over again.
I want to go back to the time that you were here in the 1960s, the Civil Rights Movement, the assassination of Martin Luther King, the Vietnam War. As a woman, as a young woman, what was it like?
You felt the world was on fire, and it was important for us to speak up. And it was the guys we knew were being drafted. But we thought we need to fight it against the war. And Hillary led a lot of those efforts.
It made us aware of a much larger world also than what we had come out of, most of us, on all of these fronts that we were, the convention of 68. I mean, there's so many. So the world was changing.
She's also serious about going through the government, not smash the revolution. She was go through the government. That's what she wanted to do. Go through the channels that exist.
I would say also her idealism. It's not about her. I mean, she is a strong leader and inspiring leader, but she works the hardest of all herself, and it's not about herself.
I want to ask you about her commencement speech, senior year. Hillary was the first student ever to give a commencement speech. What happened? Why did she land in Life magazine? Do you remember?
Well, she followed Senator Ed Brooke and spoke up to him and challenged some of his complacency with facts and figures just as she would. And said that it was important for us to speak up as women, as young people, and that was a new concept in that setting.
What was the reaction? What were the students' reaction? What was the fact?
We were hugely positive, and my parents who were there were hugely negative.
Mine as well.
She shook things up. She challenged.
Yes, but she also said we want to make the impossible possible.
Do you feel like that might happen tonight?
I sure hope so. It's looking okay.
I want to go back again. The Hillary you know, if you can describe her for us again now that it's not quite so loud. Describe the Hillary you know.
She is fun. She has a sense of humor. She is loyal. As a politician, I can tell you something I know about her, too. At one of our reunions, I sat next to her at an event, and one of the Secret Service people, this is when she was Secretary of State, handed her a little piece of paper, and she opened it and closed it. Well, you're not supposed to look at other people's mail, but I am a journalist. I looked. And what I saw was the word Reagan. And I thought, they're going to fly to Reagan Airport, something like that. It turned out later that she just was with us. It turned out that Ronald Reagan had died. But she kept her cool. She kept her calm. She was where she was. And then she took care of the next thing. I admire that.
I think it's that her temperament is so important for us to have her president, that she is unfortunately battle-tested, but she is calm, very thoughtful, very energetic, and I think and idealistic. As I say, it's not about her. It's about what she can accomplish for good.
Is it true that whenever she was given the opportunity to be the first student commencement speaker, that she asked some of her classmates, what you wanted her to say?
I read that. I wasn't in that circle, so.
Among your class or your peers here at Wellesley College years ago,
And back here in Times Square, we are thrilled to be joined by an absolute icon, an American legend, Billie Jean King,
thank you.
joins us
Sweet.
here. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a privilege and a pleasure, and I'm so stressed.
Why are you stressed?
Not over.
Does LZ make you nervous?
No, he's the one guy I know here. He's in sports a lot, so I see him all the time. Oh no, I see him on ESPN.
What are you stressed about?
What do you think? I want Hillary to win, man. I mean, I'm going to be 73 in a few days, and I think about her life, and I think about women before her, like the founding sisters who tried to get the vote, that died, went to prison, force-fed, got stoned, all the people that came before us, and it's amazing we haven't had a woman president now. I remember as a young woman, I would talk to other women and men who said, I can't believe we don't have a woman president yet, and here we have an opportunity, and there's no problem. As an athlete, as a former athlete, especially in tennis, there's no time on anything. So you can have match point and lose. So I know until it's over and they're shaking hands over the net, because I don't think these two would be able to shake hands maybe, but
they didn't in the debate.
It's not over. Yeah, I think I probably would have. I don't know. I always put my hand out, and then like an olive branch, if they don't want it, that's their problem. But Hillary apologized last night in Philadelphia about she thought it was such a negative campaign. She felt so bad, and then somebody from the audience said, "It's not your fault," and then she got a little bit of a giggle out of it, but it's true. I think it could have been a lot more positive, but.
Have you ever seen a campaign that has been this vitriolic and negative, and that's made so many Americans on both sides of the aisle really frustrated?
Never. And the one thing I want from all of us is respect. You don't have to have the same opinion. It's okay, but have respect for each other, because we're all Americans, and it gets me crazy when we're not good to each other, not kind to each other. We can get into heated discussions and not agree with each other. That's fine. But I really think it reminds me of the early 70s, actually, when I played Bobby Riggs, which was called the Battle of the Sexes. And actually ABC, it was their night, prime time, Thursday night, September 20th, 1973. And at that time, Watergate was heating up. Vietnam was just cooling down. You had Title IX. You had Roe versus Wade. We actually there was a huge division too in those days, but not this disrespect and the respect for our country and each other. We have to start over, no matter who wins this tonight. I think that's really important. But I always look at everybody's journey. And that's kind of how I judge a human being. And I look at the long and winding road that Hillary's been through. As a young girl, but I think she was born to serve. She really was. If you look at her life, when the Reverend Jones took her to hear Martin Luther King in Chicago, and when she was a young girl, and that day really kind of set the tone for the rest of her life, and it's been one of service, if you look at it. It hasn't been to go get headlines. She helped African Americans in South Carolina after law school. She went to Texas and helped Latinos register to vote. Those aren't headline things. Those are really getting down in the grassroots and really making it happen. And I just think she was born to serve. I think this is her calling, and I think it's her destiny to be the first woman president and commander-in-chief of the United States of America.
Billie, you're going to pardon the interruption. I have so many follow-up questions about that 1973 match, by the way, but
really?
I do want to break in with a little bit of breaking news. ABC News can now project that Republicans will retain control of the House. This is including, of course, some calculations of races that have yet to be called. And there you have it. There are the numbers. That's a key projection we can make right now at this hour. Back here and back to the conversation. This issue, you raised earlier the 1973 match. You've been interviewed about it. You've drawn the parallel between what you faced down against Bobby Riggs, who was a classy fella who said some really interesting things.
No, it's
Hashtag sarcasm.
I hate this, but it's so much the same, and Mr. Trump does come to the tennis, so I see him. You know, I do see him. He comes to the U.S. Open, and he's there a lot, and he loves tennis. So, yeah, I respect him, but I don't. You know, I think I really want Hillary. That's all.
What do you say to people who just don't trust her?
And
why do you think that is?
First of all, there's a lot of misogyny in the world. There just is. And as a woman, you have to. It's a tightrope. That's what, for me personally. I'm just talking from my own personal experience. Since I've been 12, I've been fighting for social justice. Okay, and tennis happened to be my platform. And so, one thing I've learned: it's so difficult as a girl or a woman. It's like you're walking a tightrope all the time because you're trying to help change. You're trying to get more for the subdominant group, which are women. The dominant group are men. Dominant groups know very little about subdominant groups, like if you're white men, you don't know very much about African Americans, you don't know much about Latinos, you don't know much about women. How about people living with disabilities? You're kind of up here, and these are not all white men. A lot of white men are voting for Hillary. I don't mean that, but it's like you can just see they're used to having life the way they want. They're used to having the privileges, and they make the most money, they get the most attention. It just is. And if you're at a table, they usually are the ones talking most of the time. I feel like I'm talking too much already as a woman right here today. But it's the way you go through life, and yet you love all people. You want it all to work, but you do want more for the people that don't have as much. And people that are in that dominant area don't like to give anything up. They feel like they're losing something, and yet they're gaining, and they don't realize it. You know, and also if you're a single mother, for instance, and you take home 78%, and that's if you're white. If you're like a woman of color, it's less. Sometimes it's like in the 60s and 50%. Then you have less for your children. And every time you have less for children, boys and girls, it's not good. So you should be equal pay because that's how you create poverty.
I'm very curious as to whether or not you believe that just the very symbol of seeing a female president is going to register with younger women the same way it does with your generation.
No, I do not think so.
And why?
They haven't lived as long. I know when I was their age, but I loved history. Do you think most young people like history or not? Most young people.
Well, what do they consider history? Like, history was last year.
1990. Yeah, well, that's the whole point.
Exactly.
Whereas I love
Those
history.
flashbacks in your Instagram or Snapchat.
Here's what I
pre-internet.
Yeah. Okay, but here's what
times.
It's like I purposely read The Founding Sisters by Eleanor Clift because I knew we were going to vote women. And she writes about the Founding Sisters, but she only writes about the white Founding Sisters. She doesn't talk, because there's no Sojourner Truth. But there was Sojourner Truth, Ida Well, all these people that helped. Everybody helped. But the white girls, most of them had more money. Their husbands had money, the white women. Like if you take Pankhurst from England, and if you take Alice Paul, Kat, all these women come from enough money that they could go do this. And a lot of husbands actually were pretty good about it. Some weren't. But it's fascinating that I purposely watched Suffragette to make myself have this spill over me so I can understand. It's like if I read Lean In, I read This Feminine Mystique at the same time. It was written in '63. This was written, just a couple of years ago. So Lean In was so I read them like back and forth because it makes me have to deal with history, and then it makes me deal with now. And how there's so much the same all the time. But I just want equality, okay? That's been my whole life since I've been 12. It's about equality. And that means in everything. And you look at immigrants. I always get a kick out of people talk about immigration. We're all immigrants. We're just how many generations removed? But we're all immigrants. Every single person on earth in this country is an immigrant. So we have to fix it. But I think we should really respect somebody and go one by one. I always try to treat each person, one by one. I meet them, I get to know them, and you either like them or you don't. Not because they're Muslim or because they're Catholic or they're of color or they're white, or just go with one person at a time. But I don't know, I'm a big believer, but I'm really stressed out.
Well, yeah. Do you want to get a martini later?
I don't drink.
I think there's some therapy dogs out there.
There's therapy dogs.
I don't drink. I eat.
Right. Hillary's on election.
How about, we have presidential Pez. How do you feel about William McKinley?
William McKinley. There you go.
There you go.
But Billie Jean, I do want to ask you this. I found this so interesting.
William McKinley.
USA Today had a poll mid-October that found millennial men were actually more supportive of Hillary than millennial women.
That's true.
And we saw, of course, in the primary with Bernie Sanders' campaign that he was getting 70% of millennial women. Where do you think that this is coming from? And Pew also found this summer that among Hillary's supporters, I found this fascinating, the fact that she was a woman was actually the least important attribute. They liked that she was competent and experienced. And I have to say, as a young woman, I see that as progress.
It is progress. Men-wise, as far as men, the younger guys are unbelievable. Also, the ones that have daughters, they're over the moon, and they just want the same for their sons and daughters. When I played against Bobby Riggs in '73, the one thing that came out of that match, there's two things. Women came up to me and said, for the first time, they had self-confidence. And were willing, they were able to ask for a raise, for instance, at work, that they waited 10 years to ask for. I said, more importantly, did you get the raise? And he said, yes. Then men have come up to me through the years. Now they've had daughters and granddaughters, maybe some great-granddaughters. But even President Obama saw the match when he was 12, the Battle of the Sexes. And he said it changed. What it did to them, to the men, is that they said they would have never raised their daughters the same and their sons the way they've raised their sons if they hadn't seen that match as a young boy. And I get that every day. So what you're seeing is a result, not because of that match particularly, but through time, the young boys, I think it's normal. They have sisters who are doing well. They can get athletic scholarships, for instance, now. They couldn't do that before Title IX in 1972. When I went to college, I worked 2 jobs, went to California State University, LA. Arthur Ashe and Stan Smith had full scholarships. One, Arthur was at UCLA and Stan at SC, but I'm shopping across 30 miles from there. And my dad said he'd take out a loan. I wouldn't let him. I said, no, I'll work, and I want, because they're so risk adverse. My dad was a firefighter and didn't have a lot, and they're depression parents. So those parents were really they always teach us never to go into debt.
Billie Jean, we could listen to these stories all night. Unfortunately, our bosses are telling us we do have to go to the state of Florida right now.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have, don't get too excited. Don't get too excited. We don't have results. But we do have, get a little bit excited. Marco Rubio is giving his speech. Let me just say, before we listen to Marco Rubio, Billie Jean Camp, thank you very much. Such an honor to sit with you. Really appreciate it.
They all thought he was going to win, right?
Yeah.
Here he is, Marco Rubio, accepting a victory tonight. Listen in.
Very interested.
I hope that we as a nation will return to our roots as a people and as a nation, respecting our diversity, but understanding that ultimately what unites us as a people is the common dream and the common hope of a better life, and that we can only achieve that if we all achieve that. And I hope that God gives me the opportunity and the voice to move forward. And I'll close with this. I hope this nation tonight, irrespective of the outcome for president, that we will all say a prayer for our great country. Because as the ancient words of Scripture tell us, unless the Lord build the house, they labor in vain who build. And unless the Lord guard the city, in vain does the guard keep watch. Let us work together. God bless this great nation. Thank you for the opportunity to continue to serve. God bless all of you, and God bless Florida. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
To Billie Jean that we missed most of Marco's speech, but there he is with his family waving to the crowd. He has just pulled out a victory in a state that everybody is watching tonight. We're still waiting for a projection on who has won the presidential race there. We can't say this enough. We can't overstate the importance of Florida. If Donald Trump loses there, his route to the White House becomes mathematically infinitesimal. We are joined now by Aaron Schroeder again, who you've met before, youngest person ever to run for Congress, a Democrat from California, and ABC's Terry Moran, our chief foreign correspondent. Did I get that title right?
That is the correct title.
Okay.
I'm the chief.
A man who has covered many a political campaign. Observations on this night thus far, Terry?
Well, I'll tell you, Florida is the cursed state, of course, of presidential elections. And if, in fact, it is close enough for lawsuits to start, and Donald Trump's a pretty litigious guy, we only have 8 justices on the Supreme Court. And so they'll run into a dead end there. But I think I think the feeling, having been out there, because I spent this past month, as you did, crisscrossing the country, is that these are two different countries, as we've been talking. I mean, I'm thinking of a kid went to a mock election in New Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. The 8th graders were great. They were fantastic, right? The most important issue to them was Second Amendment rights, no question. All of them had guns, each one. And then I said, okay, look, pretend I'm a Hillary supporter, which was hard for them. And then could we talk to each other? Could we work together for the good of the country? And I said, no way. I said, well, how are we going to do this then? Well, what are we going to do? And the smartest girl in the class, with a sharp one, she raised her hand and said, we got to split the country up.
Wow.
I said, well, we tried that. It didn't work out too well. But that really is the challenge. Whatever happens tonight, of course, is how do we go forward with a country that is two countries in some ways.
But that's learned behavior, I would dare say, as a father. Certain things kids kind of come into the world with, and certain things they kind of pick up from either directly from us or from observation. And so it seems as if if we're going to break this cycle and actually be a full country, we have to figure out a way to not have these kind of conversations, particularly around our children, because they're only going to carry around the same sort of baggage. I would dare say that their affinity for the Second Amendment was not something they were born with.
But they love guns. They love hunting.
But they love guns, and they love, right.
First 2 days of deer hunting season in that part of Pennsylvania, school holidays, and most of them take 3. Yeah. So they love hunting. It's a different culture.
I love hunting too. I'm not anti-gun, but I think that we need to continue to find ways, both in the media as well as kind of employ our leaders, to have these kind of conversations about gun control and gun regulation in a way that's respectful to both cultures. I think a lot of people, when they see gun control, they automatically assume that means that you want to take guns all away and blah, 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 blah. And there's got to be a way going forward. Otherwise, we are going to head towards what that young lady was talking about, which is really not appealing.
Not at all. And Aaron, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because we've come up against this again and again on issues like gun control, abortion we heard about again and again. But when you look at, as you mentioned, this younger generation, the most diverse generation ever to grow up in America, when we've talked about what has to happen on November 9th, what do you think people need to hear from whoever wins and whoever loses in order to be able to move forward?
Well, I think that all begins with speeches tonight by both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. The country is looking to those two people to see in what direction we're going to go. And you know how I want it to go, but let's say that Donald Trump is giving a speech of someone who hasn't come out victorious. If he holds it, if he sticks it to her on every single one of the issues and continues to rile up his base and fuel this hate speech, this rhetoric, this divisive nature, then we end up on November 9th with people feeling that the election was rigged, that she is the criminal that we all have thought that she's been made out to be, and you continue down this very, very precipitous path. We haven't seen that in our country. We pride ourselves on these peaceful transitions of powers, and I don't have high expectations, but I hope that we can have, both from Trump and Clinton, this real healing that's so necessary. And it's not just with the voters. You're hearing it from 8th graders. But you hear teachers giving stories about 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds, racist, bigoted remarks against people who are afraid that their parents are going to be deported, are afraid that they're going to be killed or hurt because of their faith. That's generational, and that's the sort of stuff that we have to address, yes, absolutely, as media, but it's about politicians also being responsible for the power of words.
The angry words get the ratings, and that
that's a lot of hope there, Terry.
No, I'll get there. I'll get there, because the people are better than the media. The people are better than their media. Having gone to a few of those Trump rallies, first one I went to, I almost wore body armor, right? Because you watch the TV and you're expecting it to be menacing and dangerous and horrible.
Oh, those are some good keywords right there. We're going to hang on to those, Terry. I'll interrupt you. Stay with us. We're going to let our TV audience rejoin the conversation and keep going. Stay with us here for just a second. Welcome to all of you joining our coverage. This is ABC News' digital coverage of election 2016. You're jumping in at a very good time. Terry Moran was just dropping the words menacing. And what else is dangerous?
Well,
because
in reference to this sense that we have that we're so far apart from each other as Americans, we can't talk to each other. I think part of it is the media. There's a lot of money in stirring up anger and stirring up fear. And going to a Trump rally, I thought, based on what I saw on television, it would be especially for a member of the mainstream media, kind of event. And sure, people gave you a hard time. Mm-hmm. And sure, people like to, when Trump whipped them up, they'd like to turn around and kind of yell at you. But it was all pretty, at the end of the day, I felt very normal, very, very American. They didn't like the media. They liked their guy and not the other guy. But I had to park about a mile away from the Trump rally because it was overflowing with people. And so walked through the fairgrounds with, 50, 60 Trump people, and it felt very normal. I think you can always pick, and you always do pick, the guy with the swastika. And that's the guy that gets in the newspapers, and that's the guy that gets on the television. And there are 7,000, 8,000, 12,000 other people who get amped up, but really at the end of the day are pretty normal. That was my experience. And I think that we glamorize the extremes. Whereas I think as a people, and maybe our faith has been shaken in this, we're pretty down to earth. We're kind of somewhere in the muddled middle.
Somewhere in the middle. Hey, thanks to all the TV audience for joining us. We'll see you back here at the next commercial break. Hey, everybody. Thanks for staying with us. Continuing coverage of Election Night 2016. Terry, I keep cutting you off.
I'm glad you did, because I definitely want to push back a little bit, because I have been to Trump rallies, and I didn't feel it was normal. I didn't feel welcome. I felt I was in danger at times. And eventually I stopped attending Trump rallies because the energy kept feeling, for me, more and more tense and dangerous. I mean, people were calling me a Black Lives Matter protester. People called me a thug as I was walking to these rallies. And so I appreciate your perspective, but I can certainly say for mine, it didn't feel as if I was going to ones. And I've attended Cruz, I've attended Rubio's, I've attended others. And I didn't feel that same sort of rhetoric or energy.
We had different experiences.
You did.
I wonder why.
And you guys should continue talking about this online as well. We have to let Terry go, though, because he is a man in demand. Thank you so much for joining us, Terry Moran.
It was fun.
Always
this is a fun shop. You guys know the toys, Pez dispensers, candy.
Would you like some Pez?
You bet I'd like some
Send up with
Pez.
some James Monroe Pez. Cokie turned us
How
down.
good is that?
The president for this person. You're like, I see you as a James Monroe kind
It's a
of man.
bespoke Pez experience.
I'd like a Martin Van Buren, since he is the last Democrat to be elected after a two-term Democrat.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Little presidential trivia there for you.
I don't think I've got Van Buren over here. No.
No, we've
I
got
can give you
Van Buren over
McKinley,
here, I'm
Jefferson, Jackson, Monroe. That's what I got.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Terry.
I really appreciate it.
Elsie, you were making an interesting point, though, which is something we talked about, too, when we were at the Republican National Convention. There was a different tone to the conversation. This is not breaking news to anyone out there. The Republican campaign was run largely on an image of America in sort of a very bad place, if you will. And really, it comes down to sort of how you choose to see the world
Trump's
right now.
speech was memorable in that regard. But let me interrupt for just a second, because we do have some news here. We've got some projections we can make. It's 9 o'clock. Polls are closing, and we can project a winner in the New York race for president. Hillary Clinton, the projected winner there. In Kansas, we can project a winner, and it is Donald Trump. Moving on to Nebraska, we can project that Donald Trump will win there. And in North Dakota, Donald Trump, the projected winner. In South Dakota, Donald Trump, the projected winner. Here's an interesting one. Texas, there had been some talk that Hillary Clinton was going to make a run for Texas. At this point, we're saying it didn't work, and Trump won. And Wyoming, we're calling that, we are projecting that the winner there will be Donald Trump. We're joined now at the little round table round coffee table by Shush Walsh. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. She's with ABC News Political Unit. Let's talk about Texas for a second.
First, we have to say, happy birthday.
Happy birthday. It's your birthday?
It is.
Really?
We'll stop there.
Fantastic.
fantastic singing.
They drove away thousands of people from the live stream with
But it
that
was worth
singing.
it.
Yes,
It was
but
worth it.
happy birthday.
Thank you.
But let's now let me torture you with some political questions.
great.
So Texas,
Yeah.
there had been some sort of late in the game talk that Hillary Clinton might be able to make a real run for Texas. Apparently, it didn't work. What gives?
So we even saw the Clinton campaign spend money on ads there. It was a 2-week ad buy. But truthfully, I think it was more a head fake than anything else. They wanted to try to rattle the Trump campaign, in those late days of the campaign, more than thinking they could actually take this bright red state. I think a story that we will be watching in the coming days are if the demographics have changed so much in the state that it looks like it could turn blue in future election cycles. But I think there was no way that could happen tonight.
And with the last Democrat to win there, I think Jimmy Carter.
Right.
Yeah, so it is a pretty bright red state, but the demographics are changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're seeing a very large Hispanic turnout today. You're seeing more Hispanics not just voting, but that population growing so much in that state. Of course, we're seeing in other critical battlegrounds, too, especially the state of Florida. But I think that, and what the Clinton campaign was hoping, they may not have thought that they were going to do much with Texas tonight, but there are activists on the ground that in future cycles want to turn Texas blue, and they're trying to plant those roots now. Of course, Texas does have some Democratic roots. Of course, the famous Ann Richards was from Texas.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's never been a Democrat in bright red Texas, but I think that it's a state to watch going forward, especially because of those changing demographics and a growing Latino population.
I was just madly leafing through my notes here because I wanted to make sure I was right about Jimmy Carter, but he did win there in 1976.
One of the things that's fascinating me about Texas is that W's nephew, Jeb's son, George P. Bush, actually ran for office successfully in Texas. It's a smaller office right now.
He's the land commissioner.
But yes. But, when I saw that, I said, oh, there's a good-looking guy. He's got the money name. He's bilingual. He's actually biracial. So when you start talking about whether or not Democrats are making moves there, you got to think that he was kind of put in that position as well to counteract that.
Right. And actually what's also interesting about George P. Bush is that he spoke out a few days ago and said that it was possible he would be the only Bush and his family to vote for Donald Trump, which is really unbelievable when he has an uncle that was a former governor of Florida and obviously ran for president, and a grandfather that was president, and a father that was president.
Just take us outside of Texas for a moment.
I switched that. Sorry.
But it's interesting. George P. is going to vote for the guy who vanquished his dad in a not so polite way.
He's the only one playing the party game.
He's playing the party game because I think he's playing the long game.
Right.
He's putting himself in the position now to be able to continue to stay in their good graces down the line. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, you got to think about donors. I mean, the donors were very upset with Ted Cruz when Cruz pulled his maneuver in Cleveland. So,
but we're also seeing a large part of the party that it's election day that never came aboard with Donald Trump. We're seeing that even today, and so that's what you saw with the Bush family.
Yeah.
Hey, birthday girl, stand by for a second because we're going to bring in TJ Holmes, who's outside in Times Square, live standing on a large map of the United States of America. TJ, what's cooking?
Now, I keep going back and forth. Where are we? I'm not hearing Dan, Amna, and LZ. If they're hearing me, then that is a miracle, but I'm not hearing them at all. So, unless I get direction otherwise, I'm going to act as if they're not talking to me. Because I can't talk to them if they're not hearing. But just the update for our viewers, once again, is that we do have this map that continues to change every hour. Now I'm hearing something else in my ear.
Hey, TJ, it's Dan Harris. Can you hear me now?
Dan, I can hear you now. Y'all been trying to talk to me, man.
I love you, man.
There you go.
So glad you can hear us. Just tell us what's cooking out there.
Dan, this is what's cooking. We've known this night was happening for 4 years, and we still having technical issues. We have 4 years to work out the kinks, and we're still doing this.
Yo,
Technically, we've had
TJ,
centuries.
we're not the only ones that had 4 years to work out the kinks. I think there's a couple of parties that have had 4 years to work out the kinks as well, and they're still pretty kinky, and not in a good way.
LZ, I always leave it to you, LZ, man. Always leave it to you.
I love TJ just pacing the country, working it all out.
Yes, I'm
TJ,
worked up
what else
out
is
here.
on your mind? Let's just lay it all out there right now. What's
Look,
happening?
They don't have a couch out here for me to lay down. I tell you all my problems. But it's been all kinds of issues happening outside. But look, guys, we're standing on this map here, and you all have been keeping an eye on it, but the map keeps changing. We're at the top of the hour, so we got that. I wanted to make sure we gave our viewers who were watching at least our live stream an update. I want to show you all. Can we hop off those sticks for a second and come over here? I want to give you all an idea of what we've been seeing outside. This has been a tradition, of course, here in Times Square for really since 1904 that people gathered here for the election night party. But you can get an idea. Times Square is always packed, right? Like, let's try to ignore that sign that somebody's holding up, but give you an idea of the crowd. It's always a crowd out here, but they come out here specific to have a party. This is an election night party. And I'm going to have to whip around and show you this way because I have to avoid a sign that somebody has up that has some language on it that we shouldn't be showing. But these are some of the folks we've had come inside kind of our perimeter here, and you see a little caricature there. We have a caricature artist. You guys should come outside, actually, and hang out here with us for a little bit. But okay, you hear the Hillary folks.
That's why I'm coming outside.
We don't have a couch, and we're comfortable right here, so I'm not really sure.
Let me just say something. Our viewers may have noticed when they were looking at that map beneath your feet that Arkansas lit up red while you were speaking, and that is because ABC News can project now that Arkansas is going to Donald Trump. Again, we haven't yet gotten into many of the surprising states. I'm using the word surprising instead of interesting because LZ is shooting me arrows out of his eyes. But anyway, that map really does light up in real time.
It does, and it just so happened that it was my home state that lit up while I was out here.
Wow.
At least we got that right? I'm sure we did that on purpose, right? We called it while TJ was on his home state. No.
Yep.
But no, it's fun out here, guys. The people don't realize we're not going to have the type of crowd we'd see out here for, of course, the ball drop on New Year's Eve. But this has been a place people have been gathering since 1904 for an election night. Literally, it's been happening for 100 years. And this is the first time since 1944, actually, that we've had 2 New Yorkers running for president. So this is a special night. Most of the people I've talked to out here are from out of town. Some have come here specifically just to party here in Times Square. But we're just getting going out here, folks. We'll be around all night. Next time you come, we'll have all of our technical kinks worked out. It'll work like a dream, I'm sure.
I love it.
TJ, I do plan on coming out to visit you, so you're not out there dancing on the stage by yourself. We can be like a double team partner, like the Johnson Brothers or something like that.
I would watch that.
Oh, we just had a technical issue on. Oh my goodness.
Never mind, I'm not coming. You need to get your stuff straightened out first.
Okay, I need to go work out. Apparently, too much weight on the map right now. Let me get off the states for a second.
Hey, TJ, can you give us a sense of the crowd response as the states are lit up and as the numbers are being projected above?
Every single time we have the update on the electoral map, on the electoral college, those numbers that are up right now, actually 129 and 97 for Trump. Every time it actually has to go up for Clinton before people will actually start cheering. That's just the truth of what we've been seeing out here. Anytime, and it's only been a few times where she's had the electoral lead, if you will, this evening, we have the crowd spark up and they get excited and they start cheering. But I have gone through certain sections of this crowd, and I'll shout out, hey, where are my Hillary supporters? Where are my Trump supporters? And I have literally not heard anyone say, hey, I'm for Trump. I don't know if they're hiding in the crowd, not admitting, or just more of the Hillary folks have gathered here, or if it's because it's in New York and it's a blue state, whatever it may be. But there are some Trump folks that I have found that have been a little quiet. They've been a little shy, been a little nervous to actually speak up and say, hey, yeah, I'm a Trump supporter over here. Everybody here is having a good time. Nobody's being nasty. But again, many folks here are just not ready to celebrate because their candidate won. They're ready to celebrate because this thing is over. Finally, we can stop talking about this. We can stop with the nastiness, the debates, the back and forth. And see, all right, here's a good reaction. You just heard the crowd cheering a little bit. It's because we had an update that had Hillary Clinton's number go up to 104. So you heard
I can tell you why that is, TJ. It's because ABC News can project that Hillary Clinton has carried the state of Connecticut, which is why you might see a little bit of blue popping up on your screen. There it is. But I have to ask you something. You said before that you met people who came to Times Square specifically to party on election night. Given how nasty and venomous and long this race has been, why would anybody travel to celebrate its end?
Well, that's the thing. You answered my question. Back to you. But really, you made the point. It's been we're talking 500 plus days of campaigning, all these debates, and you have folks out there, and again, people of LZ's ilk, right, who are out there will tell you this is one of, if not the nastiest we've seen in our lifetime, one of the nastiest presidential campaigns ever. People are exhausted. They're worn out. We've actually had therapy dogs out here helping people with the stress of it all. That people, this organization, the Good Dog Foundation, has had these dogs going out all over the city and other places around the country to help people with the stress of dealing with this presidential election. People want it over with. Let's celebrate that it's over, and tomorrow, let's get together and let's move on. Hopefully that is going to be the case, but it's going to be some hard feelings tomorrow. It's good. Whoever ends up losing this thing, it's going to be some hard feelings. So this evening, yes, I've had people from, I just had some folks from Ohio, actually, who came here, and they said they specifically came because they want to party in Times Square. Look, Times Square is the party place. I don't care what you're for and what you're against. Once you come here and you got a crowd gathered, you get excited, right? And it's just a party place. Now, we might not need to show a lot of this right now. I just talked about the party the aspect of it all. But I got a little back and forth and a little yelling and some bickering that's going on between a couple of guys. We got a couple of troublemakers out here, don't get me wrong, who have got some nasty signs, some stuff we can't even show you in this side of the crowd right now. They've been yelling and screaming, and there's been some profanity, and some are just troublemakers. Some are actually heated political debates. But, I mean, you know, this is the first type of thing like this, I assure you, we have seen, and we have been out here a good 3+ hours at this point. So, no, if people are ready to get this thing over with, yes, be great if their person won. But a lot of folks are they're relieved, Dan, that this thing is finally coming to an end.
Send those troublemakers to Bubba Gump Shrimp. That'll cheer them right up. TJ, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We'll be back to you as the evening progresses. Do, though, now want to go to the great state of Nevada, where we find the great ABC's Jim Avila, who is not only in a really interesting battleground state, but also has been tracking one of the most interesting dynamics of this election, which is the Latino vote. So, Jim, what can you tell us?
Well, Dan, as you can see behind me, the party hasn't really started here in Nevada yet. It's still early, still just 6 o'clock. Not like what TJ is getting out in the Times Square area. But they expect a lot of excitement here. Nevada is one of the battleground states, and it's one of those battleground states where Hispanics, an Hispanic surge has been predicted, and where that vote may in fact have a lot to do with who is elected for president. Another one, of course, of those big battleground states is Florida, which is, of course, in a deadlock right now, and we don't know what's going to happen there yet. But what's interesting in Florida to me as I watch the Latino vote is that how much the Latino vote has changed over the years. You know, Dan, that used to be a place where in Miami-Dade, in the southern counties, that was a Cuban stronghold, and that meant that it was a Republican stronghold, and that's changed a lot. The Cubans who were Republican-oriented have grown older, and in fact, the Cuban population has grown a lot younger. And what's happened with that is that there are even many Cubans who support what Barack Obama has done in changing the relationship with Cuba. So that has made it difficult for Donald Trump in this election cycle because he's not getting that strong Cuban vote, and the fact that a lot of Hispanics have moved in that are not Cuban. People from Puerto Rico who have immediate voting rights, of course, are voting now in that area, and especially along the I-4 corridor and up into Orlando in that area, and they are strongly Democrat. So that's really changed things there. There's also been a lot of Venezuelans who have moved into Florida because of all the unrest that's been happening in Florida, in that area. I told my microphone's cracking a little bit, so we'll go to this one. So those are two really interesting battleground states where the Latino vote could be very strong here. And of course, this year, there are approximately 27 million Hispanic voters across the country. And of those voters, according to Pew Research, 74% say they are motivated to vote this year. And of course, that motivation coming in many cases because of the negativity toward Hispanics from Donald Trump. You know, it's funny that they're not being motivated so much by the positivity as far as voting for Hillary Clinton. This is a really angry vote. And it's interesting that if you remember back in 2012, the number of Hispanics who came out and the difference they made for Barack Obama, and it was just because many people thought Mitt Romney just said, all he said was self-deportation. And now compare that to the things that Donald Trump has said, including building a wall, including calling many of the immigrants, undocumented immigrants who've come into this country, rapists and murderers. The Latino community is much more motivated this time, and they expect to be heard at the polls this time.
Jim, it's Amna. We know even in historic elections, there's always been a Democratic advantage when it comes to the bloc we refer to as the Latino vote, right? That's varied wildly from a 44-point advantage down to, I think it was like 18% 18 points rather, back in 2004, which is the closest it's been in modern history. But you spoke there so eloquently about some of the differences in terms of what's important to different parts of that Latino vote. Of those 27 million eligible voters, there are so many differences when it comes to what's important to Cuban Americans versus Mexican Americans versus Puerto Ricans. And so is it even fair moving forward to talk about this group as if they are a monolith, to talk about the Latino vote?
Well, it's certainly not a monolith, but it is becoming more and more democratic, even in, as I said, areas that were routinely Republican and routinely strong Republicans. And that was because of the Cubans, the Cuban vote, the Cuban immigrants now, who are older, and they're no longer voting straight Republican. Instead, you're getting their children who were born in the United States and are more identifying more strongly with the Democratic Party, a little bit more like the rest of the Hispanic population. Now, is it true that in the last, at least for Barack Obama, yes, Hispanics did vote in large numbers for Barack Obama. But George Bush did very well. George W. Bush did very well among Hispanics. He reached out to them. He spoke the language and did frequently, and he didn't demonize them. And so Republicans can easily get a foothold. And if once the immigration issue goes by and is finished, and some kind of reform happens there is an opportunity for Republicans. Remember that many Hispanic families are strong Catholic families, and they really are attracted to the family values that the Republicans seem to hold. There are many evangelical Hispanics across the country as well, and they are all very conservative when it comes to family values. So, and also economically, Republicans, there's a lot of small private businesses among Hispanics. The problem has been, and the problem is now, is that immigration is a gateway issue. If you insult the Hispanic community and you have an immigration policy which includes a wall, what they're finding, what the polls show, is that Hispanics are not listening to the Republican Party at all. So what they've done is they put up this huge wall. And in fact, I saw a cartoon today, it was quite interesting, which showed the White House and Donald Trump and a big wall in between. And the wall said Latinos on it. Not the border wall he's been talking about, a different kind of wall. And I think that's what Donald Trump is up against because of the negativity. Now, if that goes away, it's been said that the Republican Party does have, in fact, many issues that appeal to Hispanics.
All right, that is ABC's Jim Avila for us live in Nevada. Thank you so much, Jim. We hope to check back in with you as the evening goes on. Back here in New York, of course, we still have Shoshana Walsh, Aaron Schrody, Elsie Grandison, Dan Harris, and me. I'm Amna. Hi, thanks for staying with us. Look, I feel we've talked so much about the Latino vote, but it's going to be an issue in several key states this election, and it's growing at the rate that it is. It's going to continue to be an issue across the country.
You know, Jim brought up a really good point about how George W. Bush reached out to Latino voters. He was the governor of Texas. He had Latino constituents. I actually, after the 2012 loss, Mitt Romney's loss, I was actually at the GOP's autopsy. They had this press conference. They had this bound book about what they were going to do going forward to change the party so they could win another presidency. And part of that was outreach to Latino voters, to women voters, to gay voters, to demographics that we have, of course, not seen Donald Trump reach out to at all during this.
Well, he did reach out to the gay voters.
That's true.
In his acceptance speech for the nomination.
It's true, and he mentioned transgendered Americans, the first time a Republican had mentioned.
Mike Pence on the ticket. Don't forget that part.
But it's true. But it's true. I mean, he did mention transgendered Americans. That was the first time a Republican had mentioned that in a speech of that kind of level. So that is a good point. But he hasn't, of course, done anything to try to remedy the party with Latino voters
What
at
about
all.
the picture he sent out on Cinco de Mayo? Eating,
Right, the taco bowl didn't help.
No.
That taco bowl.
When you announce your campaign, and at that very announcement, when you are launching, you talk about Mexicans as rapists, and you go into immigrants as inferior and slander, that is the wall. And so many Latinos, no matter what their background, suddenly are shut off, suddenly are turned off. And it's going to take a lot of very diligent, focused efforts like this plan that the Republicans had in 2012, which has gone out the window, to bring that vote back. And you do see this younger, millennial, Latino demographic whose values don't align as closely with the Republican Party. So they're drifting, and you have this sort of hate, spiteful rhetoric. It doesn't work.
I'm really curious as to what sort of policy could actually come through over the next 4 years. We just saw that it's projected that the Republicans are going to keep the House. The Senate is still up for debate. So at best, if it's a Hillary Clinton White House, it looks like it's going to be split. If it's a Donald Trump White House and he even has an all-Republican Congress, will that Congress pass comprehensive immigration reform if Donald Trump, with the rhetoric that he's had, has been able to win the presidency?
I actually think a Trump win or a Trump loss, both will have to mean a rebirth for the Republican Party. There are major problems. They're in a complete schism. And either way, there's going to have to be a rebirth.
You talked a little bit about their outreach to female voters. We do have some information we can share with you now based on preliminary exit poll data. This puts a finer point on some of these things we've been talking about. Take a look at this. In Pennsylvania, women voters breaking there for Secretary Clinton 58% to 39%. Over in another state we've been watching very closely, North Carolina, of course. Secretary Clinton with a clear advantage there as well, 55 to 41. And over in Ohio, 54 to 41, currently the split when it comes to female voters. Finally, in Florida, 51 also to 44, breaking there at the moment. So
closer there, yeah.
A little closer than I think was expected.
Nationally, we're looking at a historic gender gap tonight.
That is true.
Well, nationally, it looks like we're looking at many big splits, according to the preliminary data from rural, urban, male, female, educated, non-educated. It's
old, young. We've also talked about this. There's a lot to break down. Stay with us. We're going to take just a bit of a pause. We've got people joining our party here from affiliates across the country. We're going to have continuing coverage. Stay with us. This is a good conversation. We're going to pick up right where we left off in just one moment. Hey, folks, thanks for joining us. You're watching ABC News' digital coverage of Election Night 2016. We have talked again and again about these two Americas divided across education, across racial lines, age gap. Shoshana Walsh, Deputy Political Editor here at ABC News. What are your thoughts?
Another divide, as Dan mentioned, is city and rural. Obviously, we see more Americans living in cities, which will likely help Hillary Clinton tonight, but a huge divide in those numbers between Clinton supporters that live in cities and Trump supporters who live in the more rural areas in this country.
But this two America conversation, I mean, it's not new. It's decades old. I mean,
obviously, John Edwards in 2004. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, when I think about like President Reagan and his, city on the hill, and then Governor Cuomo comes out and rebuts that, basically saying, well, some people are on the hill, others are down here looking up, wondering how can we get there. Right. So this conversation that there's the haves and the haves not have had many different forms, but continue to haunt us. And the question is whether or not we believe the people we are electing are taking advantage of this gap, or are they actually trying to close the gap?
Well, it's also, I think, a matter of, it goes back to our two-party system, right? And how closely they're identifying and tracking with how the country itself is changing. And the data shows that, the country is becoming less white. Both parties are actually becoming less white. But one party is sort of tracking with that at a much faster rate, keeping up with the the rate of change in the country, than the other. And so it does speak to representation. It's which party speaks for you if you're looking at what's available to you in terms of your elected officials.
Well, which is why, Shoshi, you were saying that you think there's going to have to be, whoever wins tonight, you think there's going to have to be some sort of rethinking, reforming of the Republican Party. What do you think that ends up looking like?
I think that there has to be outreach to non-white voters. I mean, it seems simple. The party tried it with that GOP autopsy I mentioned. It didn't go anywhere. I think, of course, if Hillary Clinton wins, there'll be more of a grieving, mourning process for the Republican Party. And I look back at what went wrong. I think a lot of it starts in the primary process, where candidates are really reaching out to just white voters in some of these places, like Iowa, like New Hampshire, and some of the rhetoric is incredibly heated during that primary process. I think it's hard for some candidates to switch over. We saw that problem with Mitt Romney. Donald Trump didn't even really try.
Right, sure. And the voters that I talk to, the thing that really bothers them the most is the fact that they know that Republican parties are not filled with racist white people. But what they don't like is the fact that when there is a racist white person in the forefront, that no one from the party takes that person down, that they actually try to appease them because they're afraid of losing that particular vote. And that what paints the entire party as something that's not being welcoming to minorities. They've got to find a way of saying, or the courage of saying, that's not us. And when someone says something that is racist, we're not going to go along to get along because we're afraid of losing that vote.
Well, it's the same with what we've seen with sexism. The Republicans, many of the Republican politicians did come out and condemn what Trump had said in the Trump tapes, but so many of them then went back. You get these statements like the one from Trump saying, I'm not going to endorse, but I'm going to vote. And that sort of rhetoric completely turns off, especially women. And you do see women, you're talking about the splits here, women so much more bothered. Statistics, I think it's 58% bothered by Trump tapes versus 44% bothered by emails. So it definitely is a turnoff, and it's something they have to address from racial, from gender, from age. We need a more representative electorate for the people.
Yeah, and going in the days forward, when we look back at the data, if Hillary Clinton wins tonight and she wins with the help of non-white voters, Hispanic voters, that's really of women. That's the story of this election.
Several more stories we need to cover as well. Hey, all of you out there in TV land, thank you for joining us. We're going to be right back here at your next commercial break. For now, we're going to toss you back to network coverage of election 2016. And we're back here with continuing coverage. Election night 2016, this sexism issue, the misogyny issue, this is something we are talking about this election cycle in a way that we haven't in previous election cycles, probably because there's a woman running for president.
Well, but also Access Hollywood.
Right.
Yeah, also Access Hollywood.
Well, I'm not blaming Access Hollywood. Access Hollywood did not say the thing.
I wasn't blaming Access.
Yeah.
It was shorthand for the tape.
I'm not going to blame Access Hollywood.
I know. I can't catch a break with LZ tonight.
But it's fun.
Yeah, I know.
You're nearby.
Do you want some candy? No one's been eating the candy, by the way.
Well, we've been handing out a lot of Pez to guests. Shush might want one.
Yeah,
We've got Pez in all of the presidents that you don't know anything about.
Actually, Shush probably knows.
Yeah, you probably do.
About all the presidents. Do you have a favorite? No.
Well, we have one president who looks a little different than the 44 behind her over there.
Yes. That one they dipped in chocolate before they put up there, I believe.
Hey, let's take a break. Let's head back out into the field. We've got reporters across the country checking out how Americans are taking in tonight's election results. Serena Marshall is live for us right now in Dearborn, Michigan. There's an enormous Muslim American population there. She's talking to some of the voters there at a Get Out the Vote effort. Let's listen in.
First time I actually felt like, okay, wow, I'm Muslim, like people are looking at me differently, and I was more like, okay, like what is this? Like I actually felt that. But then like when you start talking to people and then like being able to communicate with them, they change their perspective because a lot of people are just fed what they see on the news.
Well, now the polls are still coming in, are coming in as we speak. Only 1% of Wayne County is currently reporting, so we can't make any predictions about what's happening here. But what will it mean if Donald Trump becomes president for you?
Well, I believe what he said when he is not president, it's make the country it's going fair, because what he trying to divide and he trying to make a lot of difference between Muslim, between Latino, between black people, between white people. And if he's in the president in the White House, what are you going to do? It's going to make it maybe more bad from what it is right now.
I honestly am not worried if he becomes president.
No?
I'm not. You know why? Because at the end of the day, it's just like, it's words that are being spoken. So you really don't know what happens when he gets into that White House, because there are other people that, you know, that he has to go through before he can make any of those changes. And that's like something my dad always told me. Like when Donald Trump first came in, he said, like, don't be afraid, because at the end of the day, like, there's still other people that are going to help him make that decision before he can come. Like, these are just threats that he's saying to people, scaring people off. But at the end of the day, like, we always forget, like, there's more. Like, we got Congress that we still have to go through before Donald Trump can make any, like, decisions.
Well, thanks for chatting with us. We really
You're
appreciate it.
welcome.
We'll let you guys
Thank
get
you.
back to the watch party. Now, they're lifelong Democrats. You knew you were going to vote for Hillary from the beginning.
Yes.
Yes. And now,
it's our decision.
and that's your decision. Now, we actually have over here a Republican from Texas originally.
That's right. I'm from Tyler, Texas.
It's a nice draw.
Yep. All the way from down in Texas, up here, going to law school and studying up here in Michigan.
Okay, and you voted in 2012
I did.
for who?
For Mitt Romney.
For Mitt Romney.
That's right.
What made you align with him over President Obama?
Traditionalist Republican values that I hold dear, and I think it's incumbent upon people that come from the Abrahamic faith to be able to relate to that in terms of conservative values. So that was mainly what drew me to him, and his public service demeanor experience. He's a prolific politician, and he's made countless contributions in the public policy realm. So that was something that really struck a chord with me.
Now, this election, results are still coming in, but you voted differently.
Yes, I felt like our Republican presidential candidate and his monstrosity and his lewd, vile, he's become a national disgrace for Republican values in so many ways, and that's why you're seeing a sharp divide within the GOP party, and they've parted ways and they've distanced themselves from him because he's literally defecated on what American Republican conservative values stand for.
Now, being a Texan Republican, was it hard for you to vote for the opposite? Did you vote for Hillary Clinton then?
I did.
Or did you vote against Donald Trump?
Well, I voted for Hillary because I felt she had a winning chance out of all the other potential candidates. And even though it was something which I would have, under normal circumstances, wouldn't have done, it felt right because of her 15 years of public service experience and the fact that she has international diplomacy relations, which is incumbent for our leadership to have, to be able to maintain a balance. So I think, having said that, it's very crucial that we maintain that stature and take our nation in the right direction going forward.
And so in the next election, are you identifying as a Republican or a Democrat, or are you moving more into an independent category?
In the coming election?
In the future elections, looking forward.
Well, that's kind of hard to tell right now. I think it's a little bit premature for me to determine that. I look at every candidate individually and what they have to offer. I do not have a party allegiance per se, but it's just been because of my conservative Republican values that I've aligned myself more with Republican candidates. Like I said, this time around, it's just been a very bizarre, strange presidential race. And
Was it for you that moment, I guess, then when Donald Trump won the candidate that became the Republican nominee for president, being a lifelong Republican and seeing him stand up there, also being a Muslim American?
That's right.
What did that mean for you?
Basically, that meant that everything that I believed in terms of our long tradition of tolerance and acceptance, inclusion, was being stampeded upon by this candidate when he got onto a national platform and talked about collectively marginalizing and banning the entire Muslim population from coming into this country, sort of guilt by association tactic that he was employing to secure the constituency and the voting bloc. So I felt like he was taking advantage of people's sentiments and anger and capitalizing on that to further his own agenda.
All right, well, thank you for joining us. Now, we are going to be live at this watch party of Arab Americans. It's a nonpartisan watch party. You can see the folks behind us eating, sitting, and watching ABC News, and we'll come back to you guys later tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Serena Marshall. Now, I actually want to point out to you guys, you're too young to vote, but you had this book out, and you were here studying.
Yeah.
What made you come out here to study?
I just had to get my homework done, but I still wanted to know all about the elections and the updates that are going on. And I felt like it was necessary to come here while it was all going on.
What does it mean for you to sit here and watch this?
Number one issue.
My sister. And are you old enough to vote?
Yeah, I'm actually 22.
You're 22?
Yeah.
And
I didn't vote here in Dearborn. I actually voted in Ann Arbor, and I drove in today for this party.
Nice. And why did you guys decide to come out here to this party?
Well, first of all, we were invited by one of the people hosting this, and it was really nice to be involved and to see what these the results were with a bunch of other people. You know, get the reactions of other people.
Reactions?
Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm 16.
16. So next election you can vote?
Yeah.
Your next election you'll have your study books out as well?
Hopefully, maybe.
We'll see. So, as you can see, the room filled up, and they're all out here to support and watch the election results come in. Now, if you're just joining us, we are coming to you from Wayne County, Michigan. Now, we are in Dearborn. Dearborn is a city just about 20 minutes outside of Detroit. Both Dearborn and Wayne.
That is ABC's Serena Marshall. And Amy Holmes has that sweater. Serena Marshall is live for us in Dearborn, Michigan. That is a nonpartisan get out the vote party there. Of course, it's a huge Arab American and Muslim American population. That's one of the issues that came up early in this election season. We'll talk about that.
Has that been an issue in this campaign?
I'm not sure if you've been following or not.
Something having to do with a ban. Something like that.
Interesting.
Maybe a Gold Star family as well.
Could have been.
Strong
There was that
points.
too.
Right.
We'll talk a little bit about this back here in the Times Square studio. Amy Holmes, Ben Glebe with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
What do you say, Dan Harris? Where are we at?
I don't know. Where do you think we're at? I mean, there was some talk early. There was some talk early on that this might be an early night, but it has not proven to be true. It's 9:38. It's not, I wouldn't say late yet, but Florida, which is the state that is ranked as the #1 tipping point that could decide this whole thing, still too close to make a projection at this point.
That's right.
Florida always is keeping us on the edge of our seat. At some point, cutting off the state is not a terrible plan.
So it's like cutting it in half.
Easy to cut it out.
We should say that Brian's a comedian, just so that people understand.
Ben is a comedian, absolutely.
Ben, sorry. Ben,
No
Ben,
problem.
Sorry.
Well, I
My
can
bad.
give you a little bit of a field report about the mood up the street at Trump campaign at the campaign event, which he's calling a victory party.
Sure.
And
He's
has
calling
been
it that already.
Yes, he is. He's calling it a victory party. I have some spies on the
Uncharacteristically bold.
ground, some citizen journalists who've been in touch with me and telling me the mood of the room. They say that it is somber. It is not jubilant. It is a wait and see approach. And so I asked, what was the reaction when it was announced that Marco Rubio won his Senate seat in Florida? And a friend of mine said, well, nobody booed.
We're hearing
Right.
similar reports from the Javits Center where Hillary Clinton's going to be holding her victory party, perhaps. Interestingly, these two parties are just blocks away from each other, right? And blocks away from where we are in Times Square. Kellyanne Conway, the head of the campaign, tweeted out a picture
For Mr. Trump, not for
of
Hillary.
Mr. Trump. Sorry, yes, saying we're buoyant. There are so many close states.
So many. And one of the metrics that folks are talking about in the room, as I've been told, is looking at the electoral vote count. And if he does better than Mitt Romney in 2012, Mitt Romney, of course, getting 206 electoral votes, then becoming a huge Trump critic. You remember the big speech he gave in the press conference. And the feeling among a lot of Trumpers is if he does better than Mitt Romney, who has a bigger voice in the Republican Party moving forward?
And, of course, Donald Trump, after Mitt Romney came out and aggressively attacked Donald Trump and his campaign, Donald Trump made a huge showing about how much of a loser he is for losing so badly and asked for support to give it to him. He still lost by a huge margin. So that will definitely give Trump some more fire for his ire if you if that indeed happens.
Well, speaking of Mitt Romney, there's something I'd love to point out to you guys. You know, if you're watching on an ABC News digital channel, that you've got some other options if you want to take a break from us. I don't know why you would, but I understand. Over on one of our other live channels, there's something called the They Also Ran Museum of... Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize, Ms. Peetoling. It's not up. But there is something out there called the Museum of Presidential Losers. You can look it up, and maybe we'll go back there on one of our live channels. And there's a big question mark, of course, when it comes to 2016.
There's somebody who just joined our little campfire who worked for a guy who ran for president and didn't win, John Kerry, back in 2004. That's when I first met Stephanie Cutter, lo these many years. Thanks for joining us. Really
Thanks
appreciate
for having
it.
me.
So what's your take on the night thus far?
I think that the night, no big surprises yet. Hillary Clinton is overperforming Barack Obama in some very key counties in Florida, in Michigan, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania. But Donald Trump is also overperforming Mitt Romney in rural areas. So it's coming down to the wire. It's a very tight race. And I think we could be here for a while.
What are the states you're watching most closely, other than Florida?
Other than Florida, because everybody is watching Florida very intensely. We're down to, a third of the vote in Miami-Dade, and some of the vote in Broward. I'm looking at Michigan. And I'm looking at Pennsylvania. You know, if Trump wins Florida, he still has to win Ohio and a blue state. And one of those blue states, it could be Michigan, it could be Pennsylvania. Right now, a lot of the vote is out in big Democratic counties, so we don't know. We're projecting that Hillary Clinton will be fine in Michigan, but the increase in Donald Trump's turnout in these rural areas is something that has taken us by surprise.
So you've got a little bit of nerves around Michigan. I'm surprised because I thought the conventional wisdom was that it was a bit of a head fake.
I think that it is going to be closer than it was in 2012. And it's, look, trade is a big issue in Michigan. And if you look at the exit polls, trade is one of their #1 issues. And Donald Trump is winning those voters. And that's very similar to what happened in the primaries when Bernie Sanders took the state. I think the Clinton campaign is confident they're going to win Michigan, but it's going to be tighter than Democrats have seen it in a long time.
If your side, if your team can't pull out a win in Florida, what then becomes the state that you think we are all going to zero in on?
I think that Donald Trump has to put together some formulation of Ohio, another traditionally blue state, New Hampshire, to get himself over the top. And I think running a board like that is very difficult. He needs to win Florida. She does not need to win Florida. And the signs that the Clinton campaign is seeing on the increase in the white college-educated women, where in some states it's 2-to-1 going for her, and that's not a demographic that Democrats have traditionally won. So I think, he's got to look at Michigan, he's got to look at Pennsylvania, he's got to look at Ohio, the western states, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico. I think that she's pretty safe out there, but he's got to look at some formulation of these states. His path to 270 is very, very narrow, even if he wins Florida.
Right.
We're going to track that path to 270 as the night goes on. Thank you so much for being here, Stephanie Cutter.
Thank you.
Hey, let's hop outside of Times Square. Something kind of cool is happening. Fordham's a cappella group has joined LZ Granderson, who's now out there with TJ Holmes and Michael Strahan. Let's listen in.
And we promise neither Michael nor LZ will sing.
The Satin Dolls. I'm not going to mess that up again. Lovely. Ladies, now, can you all stick around? Do you have more planned for us? Can you sing more? Wait, that's
Do you know any Beyonce?
No, wait. No, really. Do you all have something else cooking for us you could do? Not right now. I mean, if you stick around for a second, you can come up with something, right? All right. That's the Satin Dolls from Fordham University. I won't forget that again. I just want to keep saying it, actually. But it's good to have them. You know what? That's the first time I've heard the entire audience, I say audience, but the entire crowd that's gathered here, come together and have a joint applause for the same thing.
Got the cameras. I got that on camera. I got to post it on social media myself. Girls were awesome. That was great.
Now, I'm told... Wait, hey, Matt. Yes, Matt. Hey, bring Matt in here.
Get in here, Matt. What's going on?
Matt's been the producer this evening, so every time something goes wrong, I just want to make sure people see his face.
Okay.
So
Got it.
they know.
Well, I mean, nothing's really gone wrong, though, right?
Spoken like a true producer, right?
It's going as planned.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that it's wrong.
You got it, Elsie.
Okay, so what am I waiting to hear from? Yeah, I'm having a blast. I'm waiting to...
That wasn't very convincing.
Yeah. Are we waiting to hear from Dan? What's happening here?
I don't know. Control room.
I got nothing in my ear. Control room.
We're not sure.
Look at all this you got on standby.
No,
we're not talking to them.
No, we got to do the live stream thing.
Okay, we're doing the live stream.
Get back to your live stream.
No, we're going. Oh, you got to.
Let's get the three of you in the Instagram Oval Office.
We are not about to sit in them little chairs.
Come on, let's do it.
We are not sitting in
that little chair.
We're not sitting in these little chairs.
I sat in there yesterday. It took me almost 3 hours to get out. I'm not doing it.
We're not sitting in the chairs.
I don't know what is happening out there in Times Square, but this is a show I would watch on continuous loop. LT, Michael, and TJ. Live there with the crowd that's gathered to watch election results come in out there in Times Square. Back here in the studio, we are watching results come in as well. We're going to have them for you as they happen. Dan Harris, what do you think?
We just continue, as we discussed with Stephanie moments ago. We're really just waiting on the battleground states to come in. We've projected. Not supposed to say called. We projected winners in a bunch of states. Because these are all the states where the outcomes were pretty much, the conclusions were foregone.
Right, like Alabama, Mississippi.
Yes, exactly. New York.
New York.
What do you think the odds are that Trump flips California? You put those odds pretty high. You never know. It's a weird
Never
election.
say never. Yeah, you never know. You never know.
It's a strange election.
But to get back to Stephanie's point about Michigan, and that might actually be more in play than we think. I want to go back to looking at Trump voters from the primary and who they are. And I think that the media did not do a great job of investigating and finding out. And if you kind of dig a little bit deeper, there are a lot of surprises there, both ideologically and geographically. For example,
there are different baskets, so to speak.
Yeah, so for example, early Trump voters in the Republican primary, they considered themselves Republican, but they also considered themselves moderate. And the more likely that voter supported raising the minimum wage, government-funded health care, labor unions, higher taxes on the wealthy, the more likely they were to be a Trump supporter.
They supported Trump. Why then? Because he's against all of those things.
I'll tell you why. Because early on, what they liked about him was his outsider status, and as I like to say, that he's the Incredible Hulk of the candidates. That he's going to get angry and he's going to go to Washington. And he's going to smash. And one of your competitors, they found that the greatest predictor for a Trump supporter early on was someone who lived in a county where wages had gone down between 2004 and 2014. So these are people living through economic distress, but ideologically a lot more mixed picture and certainly not conventionally conservative.
Stephanie, if your candidate, Hillary Clinton, wins, how does she reach out to people who really fell in love with Donald Trump?
Well, I think from what Amy just walked through, I'm not sure that's love. I think they're looking for somebody to help them. And I think many of those issues that you walked through are issues that Hillary Clinton campaigned on, not Donald Trump. So whoever can make an impact in their lives is, that's what Hillary Clinton is great at. She's going to be great at governing. She's faced lots of criticism of what she's like as a candidate. I personally think that she ran a terrific campaign, but she's faced criticism of what she's like as a candidate. When she gets into office, if she gets into office,
it's only 9,
she's more likely to get into office, has a greater chance of getting into office than Donald Trump. I think when she starts governing, her favorables go up, her popularity starts to go up, and
she was very popular as Secretary of State.
She was.
Yeah, but that's because she was
and as a
gone.
United States
she was
Senator.
on an airplane outside of America.
Because she wasn't a candidate, she wasn't seen as a politician. And the same was true when she was a U.S. Senator, because she was actually making a difference in people's lives.
But I
think when you see that start happening, on the issues that you just laid out, you know, they're going to have a rude awakening if they think Donald Trump is going to move any of those issues forward.
And in fact, I think it creates more of a problem for conventional Republicans, conservatives. How are they going to deal with this constituency that was activated by Donald Trump that doesn't have traditional conservative views? So when Paul Ryan reaches out to, if it's Hillary Clinton in the White House, to do, say, comprehensive immigration reform or tax reform or things like this, those are not going to be appealing issues to these Trump supporters.
Well, to a large degree, that's also, I think, why that issue is such a conundrum. It's hard to figure out what that constituency is going to do because Donald Trump's support has been so different. And I think you're so right about what you said. It's not the basket of deplorables that Hillary at the one time misspoke and painted it to be, because a lot of people say, yes, I understand. I think a lot of those things Donald Trump has said are deplorable themselves and are stupid and are definitely baiting of different tensions and different things, trying to get as much support as he can to win. But they don't believe that he really thinks those things. They say whatever. He says stupid things because he knows how to get ratings. He's a reality show guy. But he really is he's the only one who can go in there. That's what I keep hearing from people that are secretly supporting him, is that he's going to go in because he is so devil may care, and because he's so rich and so doesn't ever care what anybody says, he's the only one that could really shake up the system in that way. They don't know. I don't know how they think he's going to do it. He doesn't have experience in politics whatsoever, but they think that he's going to go in there and just be a rabble-rouser to upend a lot of the corruption in the system, as a broad general term.
But I think he's going to run into, look, I don't think he's going to be president, but if he is president, he's going to run into a problem. Even if he doesn't believe those deplorable things that he said, he has set a standard with many Trump supporters, largely moderate-leaning women, would give him a pass for some of the crazy things he said. But he has a whole swath of supporters who believe what he says and also are going to hold him to it, like building that wall, which we know he has no chance of building. Even from your ABC's own exits, more than 70% of voters support legalization for undocumented immigrants.
44% of Trump supporters actually favor a path to legalization as well. It's lower than the general population, much lower, but 44% do. And when it comes to the border wall, we already have a border wall that's actually under construction. We do have.
He's going to take credit for that.
Well, what I'm saying is that
would
be
a couple bricks on top.
Right, but that would be an easy thing for Hillary to do.
And also, he's very good at taking credit for construction projects, is putting his name on it.
Exactly.
That's kind of what he does.
So it would be easy for Hillary to say, we'll put up some more drones, we'll get some more border security agents.
But she's already for that. You know, that's what is so frustrating about the immigration debate, when a particular party is playing to their base. When they say we have to do border security first, or we want to keep illegal immigrants out, that is already happening. And everybody's for border security. Everybody wants to put more money into that. That's not a threshold issue anymore. That's already happening. And people get hung up over legalization for undocumented immigrants. And, you know, I remember the days, and Dan, this is the days when you and I first met, where Republicans were for that. And my former boss, Ted Kennedy, and John McCain and George Bush worked together on a comprehensive bill. And
led by my former boss, Bill Frist, when he was Senate Majority Leader.
Yeah, that's right.
Steph, before we let you go, I do want to ask back to your point about primary support for Mr. Trump and how it was built. There were a couple of things that came up that we have really never talked about in modern politics that got widespread support among his primary election supporters. Things like banning an entire religion of people, building a physical wall. Those were things that helped propel him through the primary season. And you know,
if you notice with both of those issues, he would take an extreme position, but then walk it back and backpedal.
The question is whether people support those policies or they support the spirit with which they were
I think it's the latter.
My question actually goes back to, well, we think, but the polls actually showed at the time that there was majority support for those policies as they were originally introduced in their most extreme form. So moving forward, when you've set the tone with that kind of language for those kinds of supporters, we've talked a lot about November 9th. How, if your candidate wins, does she set the tone beyond that? How do you move the conversation forward?
On whether to keep Muslims out of the country.
She bans Muslims. She builds a wall. That's the
knowing that there is support out there for those kinds of policies, how do you bring the country together?
I think that there's probably not as much support as you think. I think one of the reasons the gender gap is going to be so big in this election is because comments like that, people are just repelled by. You know, that's not who we are as Americans. And that's not according to a political party. That's just who we are as Americans. So I don't think that that's going to take much convincing that it's against our Constitution or our, moral foundation to ban a particular religion in this country. Look at let's remember the Khan family who spoke at the Democratic Convention and the enormous outpouring that they got after that speech because he called it, this is the Constitution. Here's my copy of the Constitution. What have you sacrificed? That's how people feel.
And I think part of it also, is also the reality show aspect of it, the fact that no matter what bombastic thing he said, and then he could walk it back and then bring up a new controversial issue and they would just rally behind that. I think to some degree they just liked the anti-establishment style of all the things they'd never heard before. But I'm saying is because of that, I think it'll be easier for Hillary Clinton when in office to shift the country back to those things.
We'll have to see how she does, how anyone does whoever wins moving forward. Let's take a break and let our TV audience join us. Hey, welcome to all of you out there in TV land. Thanks for joining us. This is ABC News' continuing coverage right here in digital land of Election Night 2016. There is a lot to talk about right there. You were making a point. I cut you off. Go ahead and finish your point,
No,
please.
I was just saying that, when people are wondering that if Hillary Clinton is to win tonight, how she would be able to lead a country that is now so polarized with these brand new, never brought up before, very bombastic positions of building a wall, of banning entire religion. But because Donald Trump has shifted so much on those issues and his support base has gotten behind all of those shifts. First it's banning Muslims, then it's extreme vetting. First it's build a wall, then it's like we're going to make Mexico pay for it, then he stops mentioning it. I think there's a fluidity there. They just like the excitement of what he says, that it might be easier than you might think to then have just a policy that appeals more to the common sense of people to address the broader issue without doing it in alienating ways that make an entire religion.
But you know who did
alienated.
this? Her husband, Bill Clinton, when he said, "I feel your pain." And I think that Donald Trump was doing a lot of that, of saying, "I get you, I get your fear, I get where you're coming from."
Yeah.
And also remember that with his comments about banning Muslims, which I thought was extreme and irresponsible and ugly and all of those things, it was in the context of the attack in San Bernardino when tensions and fear were running very high. And I think, reasonably so. If Hillary Clinton, of course, if she's president and she's faced with something like that, we will be looking toward our president for leadership, and it certainly would be a great opportunity for her to step up and provide that. So I think we need to look a little bit more closely at where these comments were coming from in terms of the border wall. We might say, oh, that's crazy, building a wall all across the southern border of the United States. But as we discussed, we are already building border security.
I think we could have this conversation for another hour if we let it go, and we might actually. Stay with us. Thanks to all of you out there in TV land for joining us. Stay with ABC News for your continuing election coverage. Hey guys, you're with ABC News' digital coverage of Election Night 2016. Let's go right now to Wisconsin, where Paul Ryan is speaking.
I'm eager to enjoy this evening with you, so thank you so much for coming out. God bless you all. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Go over here to the stairs. Come on out.
That was a great speech.
That was a really,
was
really
solid.
good speech. Our timing, by the way, is impeccable.
He goes for brevity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or we go for brevity.
He's now speaking in tweet length. Donald Trump's having an effect on people. Well, you can't believe it.
Look, you know, he's putting on a happy face there, but he is in an excruciatingly complex situation, no matter who wins tonight. Because if Trump wins, Trump's angry at the guy, and if Trump loses, he's going to still be an 800-pound gorilla in the Republican world, and he's still going to be angry.
Yeah, I wonder, who do you think really Paul Ryan prefers in his heart? Who do you think he really wants?
I actually
really good
think we know
question.
the
Because in a lot of
answer to
ways,
that.
Hillary Clinton really is, policy-wise, definitely more. You can expect what she's going to do. You can predict it, and in
But they're both
certain things-
pro-trade.
What's that?
They're both pro-trade.
They're both pro-trade. they're
Hillary
both
said, you know, it didn't meet the
pro-military.
gold standard. Remember,
She at least has a gold standard.
right? No, but I agree with you, and also because they both have legislative experience, they understand how that works. That the White House sends lobbyists to Capitol Hill to talk with senior staff about how we're going to shape this legislation together.
She doesn't tweet that he's a weak, ineffective loser. I mean, things like that would be easier to work with, maybe.
Amy, you worked for the Republicans on the Hill. Do you think?
Or a Republican.
For a Republican on the Hill, do you think Ryan is going to face a real challenge to his speakership, and can he fend it off if one comes?
That's a very good question. I worked for Bill Frist when he was Senate Majority Leader, the Republican from Tennessee, and that's when he had both Republicans on the House side and, of course, in the White House with George Bush. So you know there was working together, but a lot of Republicans actually found Bill Frist to be too centrist, too moderate. So for Paul Ryan in this environment, I think it's going to be even more challenging. Looking at the final numbers in terms of Congress, that Republicans will be losing seats. There's even a question of, will Paul Ryan be able to keep the Denny Hastert rule in order to keep his speakership? That he has to win a majority.
Tell us about what the Denny Hastert rule
Sorry,
is.
getting into the weeds here. That he needs to win a majority of Republicans in order to be leader, and he cannot put it together with Republicans and Democrats. So, that will be the first challenge for him. Is he going to be able to unify his own party around his speakership and not have to dip into the other side?
I mean, the other issue is that we are projecting that the Republicans will keep the House of Representatives, but presumably, the margins. They've had the largest margin now, 30 seats? That's the largest margin since I think 1928. My math might be slightly off. The old and timey days, to put it technically.
They had a real strong obstructionist margin there. They were able to really block.
They could block a lot of stuff. So the question now is, what is the margin, and who's left? Are the people who are left further on the right, and are the people who are losing the moderates, and where does that leave Ryan?
Right, and we also have to remember that with gerrymandering, that means that conservative Democrats have been basically wiped out. They were in 2010 after Obamacare and that vote, and Republicans getting back into power. So who is Paul Ryan going to be working with? And a lot of already he had conservative Republicans of the Freedom Caucus, Tea Partiers, who felt that he was too centrist, that he was too willing to compromise with President Obama. You remember that he did not defund Planned Parenthood. That made a lot of conservative Republicans very angry. So, yes, he has a very difficult path moving forward, and he can always ask John Boehner.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a reason why nobody wanted this job, and Boehner quit, basically left. I mean, it's a tricky job.
It is.
It is hard trying to find enough ways to legislate around the intense desire of much of the Republican leadership to find ways to take away all sorts of health care from people. I feel like that's a strong base of what they want. They want to take away Planned Parenthood, they want to roll back Obamacare. Any chance they can to take programs that help people away. Listen, it's an interesting platform. I find it interesting.
Well, I would also say for Paul Ryan, just temperamentally, he's someone who does want to legislate. He wants to move legislation forward. Yeah. But there is, of course, the countervailing feeling among a lot of Republicans, which is we were put here to put the brakes on. That's why we were elected. We were here to put the brakes on a liberal agenda we felt had gone way off the rails to the left. So, again, that's going to be another tension for him.
But you go across party lines here. One of the biggest points of frustration across the electorate was that gridlock in Washington, right? The obstructionist policies that kept people from getting anything done, that were largely led by the Republicans in this last session. And so when you've got someone, as you say, Paul Ryan, who will say, okay, his intention is to legislate, but you've got the majority of his constituents or of his caucus holding him back. Where's the way forward from that?
Well, I think maybe part of the way forward for him will likely be the fact that Donald Trump seems really so amorphous in a lot of his positions and is just doing whatever it takes to win in many ways, that he may, ego-wise, just be more caring about winning when he's in office and just getting anything through, whatever it is, whether it's his position or not. He can just say they're his positions and maybe he'd be able to shift things. So in that way, maybe I would guess Paul Ryan probably would want his
to work if Donald Trump is to win
Republican,
tonight and
there's
become
just no way to
president of
know
the United
if he
States.
wins.
We don't know.
But there's no way to know how Donald Trump would legislate, which is, to me, the most
Actually, we do have a
insane part of the
clue.
proposition.
We do have a clue. If you remember that apparently the Olive Branch went out to John Kasich to say, when it comes to policy, we'll give you foreign and domestic. Do you remember that?
That was in the New York Times Magazine article. That was what was reported there. I mean, who knows?
The campaign denied it.
You mean?
Yeah.
When they're really offered him the full board.
We're bringing a guy who knows politics just a little bit. Rick Klein, who's our political director here at ABC News. Rick, let me just ask you, I assume you're looking pretty closely at the numbers as they come in these various states that we haven't been able to project a winner in yet, the biggies, the battlegrounds like Florida, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. What are you seeing as you look county by county here? And let's just start with Florida.
Well, in Florida right now, we're seeing fewer and fewer outstanding precincts. There are still some Hillary places that could come in, but the gap is looking very stubborn. I think if we're within a half a percentage point, you know what it means in Florida. Does anyone have memories of 2000?
Tomorrow night.
Have they upgraded the Chad system yet?
Yeah, I think so. There's a big voter upgrade since 2000, but we're going to have a lot of
That's
a
the
lot
rules
of memories.
within a half a
Within a half a point is an automatic state-mandated recount. Now, look, there's still a bunch of ways where Florida doesn't matter and it's extraneous. But right now, when you see Virginia not even having been projected, Tim Kaine's home state, a state where Donald Trump basically gave up a couple of months ago. When you see North Carolina, which had some promising early signs, still outstanding. There are definitely enough votes out there for Hillary Clinton to hold down Virginia, to win North Carolina, maybe even win Florida. But the overall tenor, I mean, these states don't exist in vacuums, right? So Republican data people that I've been talking to tonight are shocked by what they continue to see from Donald Trump, overperforming Mitt Romney drastically in a bunch of rural counties, and just the way that the Democratic vote has not turned out the way that they had promised. It's certainly not matching the polls and not matching what you expected out of their ground game. So something's happening out there, and I think there are growing numbers of political professionals in both parties that are coming to terms with the very real possibility of a Donald Trump victory tonight.
Well, one thing that is happening, this map is slowly starting to be filled in a little bit more and more. A few more projections we can share with you now. In Missouri, those 10 electoral votes ABC News can project will go to Donald Trump, with 62% of the vote there in Missouri. ABC News can now also project, I believe we have a couple more results to bring you here. In Louisiana, 8 electoral votes there going also to Donald Trump, 62%. And in Montana, Donald Trump is also the projected winner right there. So 3 more states going for Mr. Trump. Rick Klein? No big surprises there.
Those are not surprises. And what's interesting is if you look at the map, all of the big battlegrounds are still out there.
Right.
There's a lot of electoral votes on the table. But there was a sense of such optimism in Democratic circles. You can see all the toss-ups that we had, New Hampshire, Florida, North Carolina, even Georgia, Arizona, all of those are still outstanding, not to mention Nevada, Colorado, out west. But look at there in the upper Midwest, the fact that we haven't seen anything out of Pennsylvania, out of Michigan, out of Wisconsin, out of Minnesota, that is going to be the battleground tonight. If Donald Trump's able to hold what he needs to in North Carolina and Florida, that doesn't give him the presidency, but it gives him a path. And that's where we start to focus on the upper Midwest and the Rust Belt states. And if a couple of those flip, then we're looking at Donald Trump in the driver's seat in this election.
So one state we can now project, and it happened while you were speaking, is New Mexico, which, again, not a huge surprise, but it goes to Hillary Clinton, according to the ABC News projection. And as you look at the map, you can see we just filled it in blue. But
that's a heavily Latino state. It's also a state that the Trump folks claimed that they had some momentum.
But he also insulted the governor.
Yes, the Republican governor.
The Republican governor, Susana Martinez. I have a question about Virginia. Now, this is a state that Barack Obama turned blue in 2008. What do we know at this point? Not necessarily if it's crucial, but are we getting the results from Arlington, the cities that are close to Washington,
We're
D.C.?
still missing Fairfax County and a good portion of Alexandria and the northern Virginia suburbs. I remember 4 years ago, Mitt Romney leading in Virginia pretty late into the night, and it ended up going rather comfortably for Barack Barack Obama. I think it's likely to end up there tonight, but the too close for comfort, I think that actually says a lot about neighboring North Carolina as well, particularly the way the white vote has come out, rural vote has come out very strongly, and it makes North Carolina, which is less favorable for Democrats, even harder for Hillary Clinton to hold. Look, if she loses Virginia, if Donald Trump takes Virginia, that opens up a whole range of possibilities elsewhere, and all of a sudden we need fewer upsets. Most of the folks who are looking at the map, myself included, sort of soft counted Virginia for the Democrats. You say, okay, let's put that blue, and then start to make some assumptions. If he's able to flip a big state like that, I believe 13 electoral votes, that's significant, and that I think allows for more possibilities. It means you don't have to run the table.
As we speak, the candidates are a block away from one another,
Amazing.
I believe, here in Manhattan.
Yeah.
I think Hillary Clinton and her husband are at a hotel, and Donald Trump is at the tower.
He's at a hotel as well.
Okay, sorry. Right, where he's having his party. And what do we know from inside the room, inside these rooms?
So we've seen some pictures from Donald Trump, as you might imagine. He's tweeting, and they're saying it's a buoyant mood inside the room as he hangs out with his family. It was a lot more dejected a couple hours ago when they didn't like, again, the numbers that even top Republican officials were seeing were not encouraging. They were talking, I was hearing about wipeout possibilities in the Senate, about all of the battleground states flipping in a bad direction. So they feel very, very good about where they stand as of now. They like where this vote stands, even in Virginia, not to mention Florida and North Carolina. Less word from directly inside the Clinton world, but I've been talking to people that are scrambling to try to explain what's happening in Florida, which one official over there said it's just a mess, preparing for that.
How?
Well, a mess in terms of where their vote has come out, and the mess about the possibility of a recount, which becomes more and more likely.
So we were hearing all this stuff about early voting numbers incredibly strong.
Well, here's the thing. What complicates early vote is that more of the country is voting early every election cycle. It's upwards of 40% now. As recently as 2000 in Florida, it was less than 10%. So more people are voting. Now, based on last election who those people were. You can't know going forward. It's hard to, it's an imprecise indicator. So people like our friend Nate Silver at 538 and Walt, his colleague over there, they built their entire model based on polling. They didn't incorporate the early vote, in part because they said, well, let other people try to do that, in part because you really don't know what to do with it. And I think
they know the party affiliation of the people that early vote?
But you don't know the demographic breakdown necessarily of who's mailing in.
And independents are a huge share of the population as well. Now, the Clinton folks were saying those independents, and many of them in Florida were Latinos. They were going to be breaking for Hillary Clinton. So in some states, you do know the party affiliation, but you're right. I mean, you don't know, are they rich, are they poor, are they black, are they white? You don't know much about them. And you also don't know that what happened 4 years ago or 8 years ago is going to predict anything in the future with early vote.
Right, and with early voting, one of the big wild cards is that they missed a lot of the mini scandals that have been happening, and so we're not quite sure how that's going to impact it either.
That's right.
And as much as, the mood might be improved over at the Trump, quote-unquote, victory party, the word buoyant, not the strongest adjective as far as Donald Trump is used to using. Buoyant just means not drowning. And so that's not bad, but it's not incredible. It's not tremendous or terrific, So
well, I won't say that,
in the middle.
And I won't say that Democrats are in freak-out mode yet, but they're getting close. And I think the Virginia thing really troubles them, again, because of what it says about North Carolina and about the white vote elsewhere. Look, I've been talking to very smart people who've been dealing with the math in the Clinton campaign.
Yeah,
different kind of smart. Yeah. They actually know math. Sorry, guys, because I know I don't.
It's like a street smart.
Like Walt Hickey math, smart. They've been very confident in the numbers, and I've actually been surprised by how much they agree with the Republicans on the numbers. But there's something happening that just wasn't reflected in the exit polls or even in all the pre-election polls. Despite
That's that hidden Trump? I think it's most that hidden Trump?
Look, it's going to take a long time to unpack, but that is certainly what it looks like now. They were hidden somewhere because they didn't show up in these polls.
Is there any idea when we think we're going to get some of the swing states coming in to be called? So we can get a better sense of really where it's moving?
It's okay. It'll happen.
I'm excited.
All right.
I don't know the answer to that. Look, I think I said early on, this could be a late night. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a close election, and I think that actually still stands right now. It could still tip very decisively in either direction, frankly. But it's going to be hard to tell where that's going until some of these fall. I think people are looking at a lot of data that's flowing in Virginia. I think you never want to be out too far beyond that. You don't want to have to pull it back. And there's definitely enough surprising things happening all over the country, and also in these battleground states, that's going to give some people pause before coloring anything in on that map.
Rick Glenn, I'm having flashbacks to our primary election coverage when you'd
When I was
say
right
over and over
consistently?
again.
Thank you
Over
for
and over
reminding
again,
me
I
of
remember
that.
Klein saying, we've just never seen anything like this before. We've just never seen anything like this
But I
before.
think underlying all of that was an assumption that things would become normal again.
Right.
America's been saying that for a year now.
And things just got
Except for
weirder.
that we have seen long election nights
Sure.
before.
Yes.
So we're not tonight in uncharted territory yet.
That's right. That's right. And people forget 2000, of course, famously, even 2004, no one projected the presidency. Dan, I know you covered the Kerry campaign.
Yeah.
Kerry did not concede on that election night.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the next day that it was clear where the
Faneuil
votes.
Hall in Boston.
That's right. But it took until the next day, and and Bush gave his speech on that Wednesday. So maybe we're there. I mean, you guys were asking me earlier the scenario that had Trump coming out tonight to concede defeat. That looks less and less likely with every passing hour and with lots of paths still out there.
If Trump does lose tonight, what do you think the odds are he also upends the traditional phone call to concede and just tweets like a half-hearted, like, yeah, whatever?
Even odds, I suppose. I mean,
Even odds.
Exactly. Fine, I guess.
Rick is smart enough not to make any predictions.
But with a little historical perspective on a Florida recount, if it's within the 0.5% and it's automatic, going back to 2000, recounts actually showed that while George Bush's number kept getting smaller, he still kept winning them.
Yeah.
And even when the media went back a couple weeks later to do their own recount, led by ABC News actually, it turned out George Bush once again won the count. So as exciting as it is, I don't necessarily think that the recount.
They don't create new votes.
No.
If either side is looking to upend it, it happens very, very rarely.
Yeah.
That there's actually a different
Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves either. We don't know that there's a recount. We've got a lot of information still coming in.
Without a time.
Let's head back out to the field. Our own Catherine Falders is at Trump headquarters right now. Let's check in with her and see who she's talking to.
And I just keep, we're live on our anchor coverage. I just want to continue talking to you about the vibe in this room. As we were saying, 2 hours ago, it was not like this. There were not people here. The room wasn't even full. The bar wasn't open, I don't think. And now you're seeing completely the opposite, frankly. People are clinking glasses. The room is full. The energy is really, really full in here, John.
There's a whistle, Catherine, that's going off every couple seconds of people celebrating in this room. Everyone's still cautiously optimistic at Trump Tower. The Trump family is not here yet at the Hilton. They are 1 block away at the tower on the 14th floor, the new campaign offices that have been open for just a couple of months. It's a different regime over in Trump Tower, and there's been a lot of iterations of this campaign. Kellyanne Conway has really made this a more open, friendly, active space. The Trump family down there, sitting with their young volunteers. I spoke to Conway not too long ago, and she was saying it's a great mood right now in Trump Tower.
And as we are seeing on Twitter, not only is it a great mood here, but champagne bottles are also being popped at the Trump Hotel in D.C. Perhaps a little too early, but we have seen the rise of social media. Donald Trump, Ivanka, Mike Pence, they're all watching, as you mentioned, in Trump Tower all together. They haven't done that before. Let's chat again. What are you hearing from campaign aides? Yes, they went into this optimistic but cautious. It seems like it has changed.
It's changed. I mean, one aide has told us that we now have a shot. Nobody is saying this is a total win, a blowout, a done deal, but the mood has certainly changed in Trump Tower. And 2 other aides explaining it as intense. Another person is fireworks are starting to go off. But again, it is not a done deal yet for Trump Tower. Florida really gave them a big boost. I would say that was a nice shot of adrenaline for them tonight. They are watching North Carolina very carefully. They are confident in Ohio. And Catherine, Michigan, the last stop of this campaign, that rally we went to last night. God, it was a late night for all of us. Perhaps
slept in a
I
long
haven't slept,
time, John.
but perhaps that last trip, Catherine, what the exit numbers are showing, may have actually been a good 2-hour flight for Donald Trump.
And John, talk to me a little bit about their path to 270. We've seen a lot of different paths to 270 for the Trump campaign. Some may argue that they don't really know their path to 270. They're just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the path has certainly changed. You know, we've spoken with multiple sources over in Trump Tower in the last several weeks. Prior to the FBI news coming out that the Clinton investigation was reopened, they said they had one path. As we got closer to Election Day, maybe we got 5 or 6 paths. Obviously, the Clinton investigation is closed, but as one person said, the damage is already done. So for voters and what they're looking at, Minnesota was a last-minute quick check-in. They had numbers showing that it was closer. Michigan was a state they were looking at. New Hampshire, which was Trump's first victory during the primaries. That was a state that in the primaries, his second-place finisher was 15 percentage points behind him, double and a half. This is a very interesting dynamic that could be at play. Where we need to watch, though, Catherine, is as we're going further out west. What is going to happen in Nevada? What is going to happen?
A state that he campaigned in a decent amount the past 2
We
weeks.
were there this past Saturday. We were in Reno. The other place that we've gone to several times in the last week, Colorado. Is that another state he could push over the edge? It's still too early. Polls are still open in some places.
Now, John, I want to talk to you about
And you're listening to ABC News reporter Catherine Falters talking to ABC's John Santucci, who's what we call, and this is a technical term, an off-air reporter. He's a reporter who's been assigned to cover Donald Trump for months and months and months. He basically never leaves the campaign, and he knows a lot about it, as you can hear.
Bad?
I didn't say it was bad.
He's being very descriptive.
I was just saying
That is an
it's a tough job, whatever campaign you happen to be assigned to. So let me give you some news here that will not be greeted warmly by Democrats. We do have a projection to make out of the state of North Carolina. It has to do with the hotly contested Senate race there. And it seems that Senator Richard Burr, according to the ABC News projection, is going to keep his seat. He was running against Deborah Ross. He got a late start in this re-election campaign. Some people thought he was vulnerable. It appears he will be able to hold on to his seat. We're joined now by Alex Castellanos, who's the Purple Strategies chair, also with Rebuilding America Now PAC, basically a Republican strategist, would be a Republican dude. So, Alex, two-part question. What do you make of the Republicans, your team, holding on to that Senate seat? How big a deal is that? And what does it say about the possibility, what are the ramifications for the presidential race in North Carolina?
Well, first you have Evan Bayh, I think, losing in Indiana, and you have a new Senator Young there. And now in North Carolina, Burr keeping his seat. So the odds of Republicans hanging on to the Senate improved. Maybe not enough. We still have to watch that seat in New Hampshire with Kelly Ayotte. But the big picture is that some of these Republican candidates are running better than expected because Donald Trump is running better than expected.
And so do you think this augurs well for a Trump victory potentially in North Carolina?
Well, it's tight. We're still looking at a lot of votes coming in from Mecklenburg County, Charlotte. That's going to go, for Hillary Clinton. We're looking at votes coming in from Durham in the Research Triangle. That's going to go for Hillary Clinton. But right now, Trump does have a shot of taking North Carolina. He's ahead. And if Trump takes Florida, if he takes North Carolina, and then he's able to take a state like Michigan, a blue-collar, working-class, left-behind voter state like Michigan, that's 275 electoral votes. Now, he loses any one of those three, and that's the evening.
Yeah, and I think North Carolina, just to hit that for a second, this is a huge missed opportunity for Democrats. And Republicans were almost writing this one off. They felt like Senator Burr was such a bad campaigner and got such a late start that they thought, wow, North Carolina, fast changing. We have the bathroom bill down there.
I'm going to interrupt you because we have big news for the first time tonight, really big news in the presidential race. We can project that Donald Trump will win the state of Ohio. This is the first really big battleground that we've been able to project a winner in. And let me just get a quick reaction from you, Rick. How big a deal is this for Donald Trump?
So I actually don't think it's a game changer. I thought Ohio was likely to flip to the Republicans. I think that and Iowa were the two that were most likely to go. This will pale in comparison to a North Carolina or a Florida or a Pennsylvania or a Michigan, but it's symbolically important, and it has a history as a big
she
battleground.
Campaigned there late at Harvard,
LeBron James,
Jay-Z, and
right.
Beyonce and LeBron James. So clearly, she thought she had some sort of chance here.
They saw that as a knockout punch if they had won in Ohio. But this was absolutely critical for Donald Trump's chances. Hillary Clinton has lots of ways to get around Ohio. She doesn't have lots of ways to get around if you lose Florida, if you lose North Carolina, or even Virginia. But she can manage around this. That's not to understate its importance for the electoral map. No Republicans ever won without Ohio, and Donald Trump's got it in his column tonight.
And remarkable that he was able to do it with the Republican Party in that state basically hating him. Yes. Kasich and Portman not even showing up at the convention held in their own state.
We put Kasich down as undecided. He was less than enthused. But I'll tell you, there does seem to be a Trump wave. not among younger voters, not among well-educated voters. But there does seem to be a Trump wave among that disenfranchised, left-behind voter. And the intensity of that vote is what has carried Trump in North Florida, what seems to have delivered in Ohio.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. We're going to give a quick pause here while some folks out in TV land join us, and we'll be right back here with more. Hey guys, you are joining ABC News' digital coverage of Election Night 2016 in progress. Alex Castellanos was just about to give us your insight on this Trump wave you've been seeing.
Well, the intensity is there. We always wondered, is there a Trump bump? Is there a because you look at the surveys going up into the election nationally in these swing states, and it was just not quite enough. But tonight, Donald Trump is overperforming, and it seems to be that the Budweiser voter, the good old hard-working, blue-collar, white guy, less educated, versus the Starbucks voter, which is where Hillary Clinton is cleaning up tonight. She is in the I-4 corridor in Florida, the younger, more diverse, better educated. She's doing well there. The difference, there seems to be more intensity with the Trump voters. They're turning out at a higher rate, and that's what's keeping this race competitive right now.
But in order to flip one of the big blues that he needs to in order to secure that 270, and you mentioned Michigan, and that's a state that President Obama won by 9.5 points. That is some serious heavy lifting. Yeah. I mean, and then you look at Pennsylvania, again, another state that Obama won pretty comfortably. That's another state that's a lot of heavy lifting. So in order for that Trump wave to overcome that, you're suggesting that the anger and the frustration there.
I'm saying that it seems that Trump has revved up the engine in the Republican Party way past the red line, and it nearly blew up the car, but it's delivering a lot of voters to the car's smoking. It's delivering a lot of voters to the poll, and that's what's keeping this race tight.
And Alice, as you know, Trump has been saying to Republicans for a long time, embrace this. Stop trying to fight it. Lean in with what I am doing here to the country, getting people energized and engaged. And lots of Republicans in places like in Ohio said, no, that's not my party. That's not where I see it going. And they did not want to embrace it. And now it actually could be helping save a bunch of their jobs.
And it may save their jobs. And this may be a Donald Trump that outperforms Mitt Romney. The Romney campaign always said, no, we didn't leave any voters out there behind. Those blue-collar Democrats, we wouldn't have gotten them anyway. Well, turns out there were some voters left out of the Romney coalition. Donald Trump may overperform Mitt Romney's campaign.
I'm curious as to why did you change your support? Because initially you weren't supportive of Donald Trump, and then you switched over later. What was it about his message that convinced you?
It wasn't so much his message or Hillary Clinton's message. It's just that I'm concerned about the nation and the direction we're going, and $20 trillion worth of debt, losing respect in the world. Seems like the world's on fire and falling apart. And I worry that 4 or 8 more years in the same direction, we couldn't afford it. We'd go too far down that road to turn back. And Donald Trump is disruptive change, sometimes scary change. But when the plane's headed for the top of the mountain, the most dangerous thing you can do is not change course. And so if somebody could tell me, hey, this election is not urgent.
Alex, you were not alone in that evolution either. I know a lot of other people who made that same kind of that switch, and we should talk more about that because I think a lot of the country was feeling that way. We're going to take a quick pause right here. Some folks out in TV land are going to be joining us. This party's about to get a little bit bigger, and we'll be bringing you all the results as they come. Hey guys, still here, continuing coverage of Election Night 2016. So this evolution you were talking about, Alex Castellanos, about getting on board in terms of the direction of the country. A lot of people felt that same way. There were still some Republicans who were holding out, walking that tightrope we were talking about earlier. But tell us a little bit more about that. What was the case that was made to you?
Oh, no one made a case to me. I just, you look at the kind of the direction that the country's headed. 60-70% of Americans think the country's headed in the wrong direction. And by the way, that's not a Republican phenomenon. That's happened in the Democratic Party, too. The Bernie Sanders voter felt the same way. It's not even an American phenomenon. A lot of people around the world are feeling that big old dumb top elite running everything and telling us all what to do. That is not the way to run things in a connected world, right? The old factory-like system seems to be failing us all.
But isn't Donald Trump part of the elite? I mean, the dude's allegedly a billionaire.
He's a lot of folks look at Donald Trump and see something quite different.
What do you see?
They see a guy not from New York but from Queens, who was never accepted in New York and who had to come in here, compete economically, buy their buildings and put his name on them to kind of show them. So I think that's why a lot of people see him as a blue-collar billionaire.
But what do you see?
What I see...
Because you know the truth. You know he is a blue-collar. He's not a blue-collar person. He's a one-percenter. He's always been a one-percenter.
Well, first of all, I don't think there's anything wrong with being a one-percenter.
Listen, I'm trying to get in the club.
You earn it.
I'm trying to get in the club. So I'm not hating on it. I'm just saying where he's at.
Let's wish us both luck on that one. No, what I see in him is that, I mean, if there's any message from tonight, win or lose for either of these candidates, it's how, I guess, outraged a lot of Americans are about both parties in Washington and how those parties have failed them. Donald Trump, I think, is an expression of the American people's outrage at a bunch of politicians from both parties we've sent to Washington for decades, promising they're going to fix everything, deliver everything, give them a little bit more money and power. It's going to be awesome. And nothing's changed. It's all gotten worse. So I think that is the message I think I get to both parties. And frankly, I think it's a great thing.
Trump got that from the beginning. I would say he didn't pretend to be someone he wasn't. He came down from that escalator. You knew who he was. He wasn't pretending to be blue collar. People aspired to be like him, but he channeled a lot of the frustration, a lot of even the anger, as Alex talks about. And I think he understood the power of that message where no one in the Republican Party, very few in the nation thought initially he could do. He saw the power in a simple message. Look, Donald Trump was failing in every way in this campaign, in terms of the money, in terms of the organization, in terms of any traditional metric that you can bring on politics. The one thing that he had over Hillary Clinton was a message. You knew what that guy stood for. Make America great again. From the very beginning, there was no question that's what he stood for. Hillary Clinton never found that bumper sticker.
I think that's so important. I was going through the airport at DCA, the little tchotchke stand where they, the guilty dad buys something before he gets to go home. And they had T-shirts, $7.99. Donald Trump T-shirt, Hillary Clinton T-shirt. What did the Donald Trump T-shirt say?
Make America great again.
What did the Hillary Clinton T-shirt say?
Vote for me, I'm not Donald Trump.
Basically,
That's
it
really
said
wrong.
Hillary in 2016. It said nothing.
Yeah.
And even her message, stronger together, is a reaction to him, not a direction for the country. Really.
Well, I think it's safe to say that this is not an original idea, but this election is a referendum on Donald Trump. I mean, he is what this race is about.
Well, although I would say, if he ends up winning, he made it a referendum on Hillary Clinton as the status quo. This election, whoever was doing better in this election at a given time was the person that wasn't being discussed. Every time we talked about Trump, Hillary did better. When we talked about Clinton, Trump did better. And I think if at the end Trump is able to pull it off, it's because he was able to make it, look, crooked Hillary. It's about the status quo and about not being that. That, I think, would be the big shift that he was able to turn.
Rick, you mentioned some of the things he's been able to channel to deliver that message. He also channeled a lot of other things, like some xenophobia, some anti-immigration messaging, some misogyny. Yeah. There was a lot of that did resonate with, I'm not going to say a lot of, but with a significant portion
I'm just going to jump in 1 second. Sorry to interrupt you there, because we do have a significant projection to make here. The state of Virginia is going to go to Hillary Clinton. So this is a significant development. Again, ABC News is projecting that the state of Virginia will go to Hillary Clinton. Alex, let me go straight to you, because you were holding out some hope here that perhaps Trump could eke out a victory in this state.
Hope beyond reason, but yes, but look at how tight that is. Yeah. All the polls had Hillary Clinton 8 to 15 points up in Virginia. 100,000 votes, 50,000 votes in that state might end up being the difference between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in Virginia.
So you're saying this bodes well for North Carolina
for
Trump? Well,
it bodes well for, a lot of other states that Trump is doing that well in that state.
And I put this in league with Ohio for Trump. You need this. If Hillary Clinton lost Virginia, suddenly it's advantage Donald Trump, and Hillary's the one playing defense. So this this is going to keep the game interesting for a while longer. This was part of the blue firewall that needed to hold for Hillary Clinton.
And the exit polls had her, I think, way up in Virginia.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. We've got to find out what went on here. Is there a vote that just did not want to say it was going to vote for Donald Trump?
Right. That's been the theory all along, but a lot of pollsters have said that's not true. There may be a bunch of people who are voting for Hillary who don't want to admit that either.
If you can't figure out that it was uncool to vote for Donald Trump and tell someone in this election, you don't have a phone or a television. You know,
yeah, there are lots of
And there's a reason for that. And I want to go back to a point that Amnon was making earlier, was that he absolutely did tap into an anger there that's from a forgotten voter base. But he also tapped into some other things, too, that shouldn't be downplayed, because there's a reason why Donald Trump's car might have blown up. It's because of the rhetoric that he was saying. Some that was Islamophobic, some was racist. Definitely some misogyny was in there.
Well, I would not concur with you that Donald Trump or his supporters are racist. You know, certainly there's some of that in American life throughout the spectrum. I think when you're seeing a race this tight, the American people aren't voting on race and aren't voting on, I don't think, Peter Thiel said it well the other day, I don't think people are voting for Donald Trump because of his faults. I think we all know what they are. Imagine what Donald Trump could be doing in this campaign right now if he hadn't done some of those things. I think clearly his campaign is paying a price for some of the things he said. I don't think it's the reason he's winning. I think it's the reason he's not winning by more.
So is he the future of the GOP now?
I don't think Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is the turnaround CEO who Republicans in America are looking at. Come in, clean up the books, fire some people, stop our competitors from kicking sand in our face, because if we don't change direction, there may be no business tomorrow. But in terms of the future of the Republican Party, he is the message Republicans said you've got to change to the establishment. And I think right now, after this election, the Republican establishment, the Tea Party, the social conservatives, the outsiders, the Trumps, kind of need to get together and have a message that appeals to more than just that Budweiser voter.
Well,
how do we
the
talk to
reason
the
why,
next
Alex,
generation? And there's a way to do that for us.
I got to push back again. I mean, I'm not going to let you just sweep across and just say, well, I don't believe he's racist. When he has a well-documented history that if he's not a flat-out racist, certainly seems to have...
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll offer a different point of view on that. I'll tell you what I think is racist. I think is racist is looking at
Why don't you answer the question about Donald Trump first?
I will. I think what's racist is looking at our inner cities and what we've done to families there, and then advocating the same policies that destroy people's lives.
Like not giving housing to minorities? Would you consider that be racist?
I think looking at our schools that are failing kids that are dropping out, and they're just not dropping out of their lives, they're dropping out of all our lives, and then perpetuating the same policies, not offering them a chance to choose a better school.
But
I think
Trump
that's
took
racism.
out a full-page ad condemning these black men who were innocent, and then when DNA evidence exonerated them, he still said, well, they did something wrong. You don't think that may have sent a message to minorities that perhaps this candidate doesn't embrace them?
I'm not going to defend everything Donald Trump has said and done, because some of it I think is indefensible.
Okay.
But I am telling you that I think America needs to change. And I never thought the first Republican to go into the inner city and say, there's something better for you than this, than the same old Democratic policies that are destroying young kids, that are destroying families, that are trapping these people in urban islands of poverty and despair. We can do better than this. I never thought it would be Donald Trump, but I'm glad it was.
Alex, the Republican Party has a problem, though, right, in terms of tracking
Just one?
I got a few. But
Thank you. That's good.
You have said before that you need to be more inclusive. You've got to reach out to the changing demographics of the country. This candidate has done the opposite. So how much of your work going forward is just cleanup crew?
I think there's a better Republican Party out there than the one Republicans even rejected. We had 16 of our alleged best and brightest, and Republican voters were so disappointed with what the Republican Party had become that they chose this outsider to kind of mow them all down. So what does the next Republican Party look like? I think it looks like the new economy. I think you're going to see Republican candidates like Paul Ryan say, let's open up this economy for everybody. let's grow it naturally and organically. Let's grow it bottom up, not the old way, top down from Washington. That's failing minorities, working people, failing kids coming out of college with no jobs. Let's open up this economy. Let's open up education so everybody can choose a better school. Let's open up healthcare so there are more choices and we don't all end up in the VA. I think you're going to see a Republican Party that's for opening things up and giving people choices and power. And a Democratic Party, frankly, Hillary Clinton is kind of more of the same. Big old top-down, Washington, closed systems that deny that.
We're going to have to leave it there for now. Alex Castellanos, thank you so much for making the time to join us.
They want you back on the TV side. Thank you very much.
Head back outside to Times Square.
Guys, I got 2 pennies on that one. What's your name?
My name is Rock Opera.
Rock Opera, thank you for my 2 votes on my way to 270. Now, what brought you out here tonight?
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton, how come?
I think she's the best person for the job.
Oh, you just see that? She got Colorado.
I love your fanny pack in the back.
Thank you. You checking out my fanny pack.
Now, what else do you want to ask?
We just saw that Hillary Clinton got Colorado. The crowd here, clearly a lot of Hillary Clinton supporters, a lot of celebration. Now, why did you vote for Hillary Clinton?
Because I think she's the best person for the job to help bring this country together.
What about you? Did you vote in this election? Who'd you vote for?
Hillary. Hillary.
That's great, guys. Thank you so much for coming out here. Enjoy the rest of the night. All right. Nice. Thank you so much. Thank you
give
so
a hug,
much.
give a hug.
Oh, I get a hug too. Mwah. Thank you, thank you.
That's right. And that's real love. You don't want nothing else from you. It's real love.
Enjoy the rest of the night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey guys, how's it going? Oh, you are living it up in time. Now, were you cheering for Hillary Clinton's Colorado win, or were you booing?
I was cheering.
You're wearing your Democrat blue and everything.
I am representing for woman power. And I am supporting number one. We have overcome and we will stand together in unity. Go Hillary Clinton. Yes.
Now, most people you're meeting out here tonight, are they also supporting Clinton, or you mean some Trump supporters as well?
Well, majority of the people that I'm with, they're cheering for Hillary Clinton, but we did hear some people for Trump, so we hit their hands down. Sorry. But
well, it's good to see, people expressing their opinions, even if they're not your own.
Let's take it back inside from Maggie, who's out in Times Square.
You're supporting your
worth pointing out that New York is a pretty solidly blue state, which is why we're seeing a lot of Clinton supporters in Times Square. We do, however, have some news for you. Let's go to a projection we can make in the state of Colorado, where ABC News is projecting that Hillary Clinton is the victor in the presidential race. Also, some news out of the Senate race. Michael Bennet carrying the Senate race in the state of Colorado. Not a huge surprise there. And in Arizona, John McCain winning re-election in the state of Arizona. So let's go back to our little fireside chat here. We've got a few new additions. Farai Chideya from 538, and Walt Hickey's back from 538 as well. Let me just ask you, Farai, first of all, I've been kind of obsessed with the 538 podcast over the last couple of weeks, and you're one of my favorite contributors.
Oh, thank you.
You had a lot of things to say I want to ask you about, but before I get to that, let me just quickly ask you about the news we just announced. How important is the Colorado victory for Hillary Clinton, and what does McCain's victory in Arizona say about her chances of eking out a victory in what has traditionally been a red state?
Yeah, I think that the Colorado victory was expected, particularly because of rising education rates in the state. It's a magnet, and I have to say that among many other reasons people are moving to Colorado is to work in the legal marijuana industry, which is providing billions of dollars in revenue, increasing the strength of the school system. So there's actually a real boom going on, and so I'm not surprised by that, so I don't think it changes the math. I think that Senator McCain has struggled in Arizona, but he was also expected to win. I'm waiting to see what the Latino voter turnout was in Arizona. That, if the state goes blue, will be the reason. But it's also a very strongly Republican state. It was one of the bases of the Tea Party, with the Colorado River Tea Party. So 538's model still favors Arizona staying red.
Walt is squirming in his chair, ready to drop some wisdom on us. What do you have to say?
I think that analysis is perfect. Colorado going to Clinton is not a huge win for her in this kind of sense. It's really going to come down, based on the research that our colleagues at 538 have done at the moment, to Michigan and Wisconsin. At the moment, it's very difficult to envision a map in which Hillary Clinton wins the presidency without winning Michigan or Wisconsin at this point. Now, should she
Michigan or Wisconsin, or Michigan and Wisconsin?
So here we go. In Michigan, I'm saying even possibility, not preference. So if she wins both, then she's favored to win the presidency. If Trump wins both, then he's favored to win the presidency. And if they split the difference, Trump is still a little bit favored to win the presidency, but nowhere near as much of an end-of-ball-game scenario for Clinton as it is should he win both.
How's it looking in the early returns as we look at county by county in Wisconsin and Michigan? I know that can be misleading because you never know which county. Some counties where we know we're going to have big Trump or Clinton support haven't come in, et cetera, et cetera. But how's it looking early?
Right. So
After
again, in the state of Michigan, it really kind of comes down to the city of Detroit. It comes down to other these high urban areas. We need to wait until that vote comes in. I know you were just at the office,
and I also saw a report that the Detroit Free Press called Michigan for Clinton, and I wasn't able to confirm it because I wasn't able to access their website directly. I did find a reference to it, but it may just be that their site is overwhelmed. So ABC has not called the state, but if that's true, that the Detroit Free Press has called it, obviously that could be an indicator that it goes for Clinton.
Let me ask you, just on a larger front, something you said on the 538 podcast recently that really, or actually I think it was in a little video that was on 538 about the legacy of this election. You said, in the long run, you predict this election will be healthy.
Yes.
If we reckon with what we've all gone through instead of retreating to our corners.
Right.
I just, given how nasty this whole thing has been, I think it's going to be surprising for people to hear you argue that in the long run it could be healthy.
Yeah, I think of this as a kind of purgative where we've, spit out a lot of really nasty stuff that was making us sick. And one of the things that I think that today's tightness of the vote makes me realize, even more than I already did from doing so much reporting on voters, including Trump voters in Ohio, a state I'm not surprised that Trump won, is that there is a fundamental level of disrespect that working class Americans feel is targeted at them. And while Black and other non-white or Latino working class people have felt disrespect on many different levels, I think the white working class is shocked by the level with which an increasingly college-educated country, where the gains go primarily to college-educated people, is not a place where they feel welcomed. And I think that one of the things that has to come out of this election is looking at xenophobia, racism, sexism, but also looking at class-based bias and how we construct identities for people we don't even know. So if what comes out of this election is that we get to know each other better as people, it's healthy. If what comes out of this election is that we hate each other more as people, that's extremely unhealthy.
I agree with you 100%, particularly when it comes to classism and this notion that you get out of high school and you have to go to college. Now, that was something I expected from my son, but I also knew the direction he wanted to go. We have to find in this conversation in terms of education and education reform a place where it's okay not to go to college, but you can go to an institution to get a 2-year training to get a skilled position. Or we get back to having some of those positions available in high school. So when you graduate from high school, you actually have employable skills that doesn't require you to then get into debt by tens of thousands of dollars in order to get a job so you can pay that debt off for the next 30 years of your life.
Yeah, we did a series on 538 called Kitchen Table Politics, and precisely about issues like this, and looked at the strength of vocational track education in countries like Germany. Germany is the economic bulwark of Europe. And so in America, we think of vocational education as where you put the dumb kids. And that's essentially, it's become educational tracking. But in Germany, there's very focused vocational education that puts a lot of people on a career track at 16. And we're just going to have to assess how we are, whether the rising tides in America are lifting all boats. And right now, they're not.
Speaking of lifting.
Yeah, go ahead. Please, you've got notes.
Well, I do, because it's one of slight interest to me because I live in one of these states. You mentioned marijuana in Colorado. Yes. There are...
Lifting?
Lifting.
Transitions go.
Yeah, lifting. We're going higher. That's what I'm
gotcha,
saying. You got me?
Okay.
There you go. Speaking of down ballot issues, there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
Oh, someone's been looking at the notes.
It piques my interest. Piques my interest.
That are considering making recreational marijuana legal. California, where I live, happens to be one of those states. But the one that's really interesting to me is Massachusetts, because they already have medical marijuana as legal, and now they're just saying, okay, the charade's over. Let's just vote to see if everyone.
Isn't that the way California is?
Yes, California right now
as well.
is medical,
yeah, you're right.
but it's on the ballot for legal. Yeah.
But I could tell you that's a charade, and I'm just saying from experience.
Yeah, because every time I've gone to California, I get the strong sense that it's legal.
It's a great Key and Peele video about him going to get a medical marijuana card, and he's like, and the doctor's basically like, just tell me you want it, and he's doing all these making up symptoms, and anyway. But the reality is that marijuana stocks, and there are stocks you can buy, are going through the roof. People who make hydroponic equipment are selling tons of it. In many states in America, marijuana is the largest cash crop, and now it can be the largest crop you can buy with a credit card, too.
We were just talking before this, though. At the moment, right now, stocks do not appear to be going through the roof.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. In general.
Yeah, no.
But I think the marijuana stocks probably will rise even higher.
No, but you raise an interesting question.
The Dow Jones futures market.
Exactly. Absolutely.
The Mexican peso and the Dow Jones future market both going down because people are worried about how close this race is.
Absolutely,
right now.
Yeah, I've seen. The last report I saw was futures down by 700 and peso down by 10%. And the reality is, we can say it's about the uncertainty, but it's really about Donald Trump possibly becoming president. And that I will say flat out, because the markets had stabilized on news that Clinton was ahead. And so I think that Donald Trump, and again, I'm not impugning his voters. I think that there's a real difference between the man and his voters. But Donald Trump has said flat out that he will restructure trade. He will not honor NATO obligations. This is not what the world wants to hear. This is not what the stock market wants to hear.
And there's also, it appears that there was more certainty as to which way the election would go in the general population than, again, even our model kind of has realized recently. We had a significantly amount more volatility and doubt even as recently as possible. Like, as recently as last week, I believe, it was just like a dice roll. It was like, if you get 5 or 6, Donald Trump becomes president, that kind of thing. So,
your model was a lot more pessimistic for Hillary Clinton than in these final days than almost any other model that I was looking at. You had it 2/3.
Yeah, absolutely.
What'd you say?
I'm buying Nate lunch.
You're buying, Nate
not to get too far into the weeds here, right? But one thing that Nate built into the model is the idea that states behave like states that are similar to them electorally, and that the errors are correlated between similar-looking states. Wisconsin's going to behave more like Michigan than it will like, I don't know, New Mexico, right? And what we're seeing so far in this election is actually a rather solid justification of that. If you're looking at the swing states that have gone towards Hillary, you're looking at Colorado, you're looking at New Mexico, you're potentially looking at Nevada, right? Those are diverse populations, similar geographics, similar state behaviors, right? And if you're looking at the ones that are resisting her far more than the polls originally implied, again, they're in the upper Midwest, that kind of thing. So states underperform and overperform their polls, similar to one another. And I think that that's an interesting thing that we took away from this election as a whole, potentially.
Farai, moving beyond the polls, you've been doing a fascinating series this entire election season where you're going deeper into the voter profiles. Right. And I'm curious, just sort of big picture now, here we are finally on election night. Yeah. Are you surprised by anything that you've seen so far in terms of how the vote's turning out?
I am surprised by many of the returns, but not when I begin to think about conversations I had with Trump voters. So there were 3 sets of Trump voters that I spoke to that all came down for Trump after 1 was very firm, but 2 were wishy-washy. And the wishy-washy ones were white evangelical Christians. And that demographic has gone for Trump by close to 90%, which was predicted. And despite concerns over his personal values, there was a calculation that he would be better holding the line on the Supreme Court. And the other one is white suburban women. And right now, in Florida in particular, exit polls from women are not strong for Clinton. She's still getting 51% of women, but that's smaller than the gender gap in other states. And Florida is, if nothing, a land of endless suburbs. Yeah. And, and also a lot of people closer to retirement age or retirees. And so that may account for the gender, dynamics in Florida.
Yeah, I too have spoken to a lot of Trump supporters who specifically have mentioned the Supreme Court as rationale as to why they will continue to support him, because they are concerned about some issues. And I think we actually have a board that sort of shows that whoever becomes president, when you look at the ages of the Supreme Court justices and actually the empty seat right now, that a significant change could happen generationally based upon who becomes president and who actually goes on to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, agreed. And I definitely think that, you know, when you take a look at what's going on with people who had to make hard decisions, it's not that all Trump voters loved him. Many Trump voters were concerned by aspects of his behavior, but they still made a calculation that this was absolutely what they had to do to, you know, the Supreme Court may be a 40-year cycle in America. So if you think about a president maxing out at 8 years and a justice perhaps having 40 years, you can begin to understand how someone may not be motivated by xenophobia or race or gender and still make the decision they made.
Well, and that was the case we heard again and again, right, from other Republicans who were helping to make the case for Mr. Trump. Mike Pence himself, when he penned his op-ed, it's like the second or third paragraph in, he said, by the way, the Supreme Court is still a really big deal, and this is how we protect it for our interests. So I'm curious, though, on Pence, which is something we haven't talked about yet. How much do you think his addition to the ticket helped to move some of those voters, especially when it comes to these evangelicals?
I think he helped very strongly with evangelical voters and other kind of movement conservatives and social conservatives. And also just was a steadying presence for many people who were concerned about Donald Trump's temperament. We have to remember, it seems like so far in the rearview mirror now, but at times people were asking if Trump would abdicate as soon as he became president, if he did, and give it to his vice president. And if you saw that scenario, some people were like, I'm okay with that. That's good. That works for me.
Well, we talked about how the world is watching. We've got one of our own down there in Mexico City. Jose Cohen is at a watch party as people are watching the results come in. Let's listen in to see what they have to say.
Reach his lowest rate against the dollar. So it is a very, 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 very nervous night for Mexicans.